The suck zone. It's the point, basically, at which the twister sucks you up. That's not that technical term for it, obviously.
All right. Well, in that case, hello and welcome to another heart-pounding episode of Rule of Thirds, a monthly arts and culture podcast with a film emphasis. Each month, we take a look at 3 films, united by a common theme, then discuss and debate them amongst ourselves. Join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter at Thirds Rule. I'm one of your hosts, Stephen Foxworthy, and joining me, as always, are your regular co-hosts and commentators, Samuel Dumas.
Hello.
And Caleb Dunkerson.
What's up, guys?
What's shaking, gentlemen?
Not much.
Is it the earth under your feet?
Well, no. Because nothing's shaking. Well, the wind blows, my house shakes a little bit, but it's also because my house is on wheels.
That's true.
Yeah, but it's not really on wheels right now. Like, there are wheels down there, but it's not on them.
I guess that's true.
They're kind of deflated and not really supportive of the house at this point. But rest assured, there are wheels.
Let the record show, for all listening at home, there are wheels. On this episode of Rule of Thirds, we are going to move on to our next genre study. Over the next few months, as we said last month, we will be investigating some classic and some overlooked film genres, looking at their histories and their enduring legacies, as well as films that we feel typify those genres best. Tonight, we look at a classic Hollywood film genre, the disaster film. But before we get too deep into that, we do have one initial and essential question to ask. Gentlemen, what are we drinking tonight?
Amaretto and Coke.
Nice.
Well, guys, to keep things in the traditional form, I am drinking once again.
Don't tell me. Whiskey and Mountain Dew.
Yes. Okay. So here's basic. Okay, guys, I've been trying to play this off like it's some sort of tradition, but it's not. What it is that I can't buy liquor on Sundays, and I always forget to buy alcohol before purchasing before this podcast records, and we've been recording on Sundays lately. So it's like time to record the podcast. I'm like, well, what do I have? And I can buy Mountain Dew on Sundays.
Are you sure you live in Arkansas?
That's not illegal.
You live in Arkansas? You live in Arkansas, right?
Yes.
Really? Because that sounds like an Indiana law.
Yeah, but it's also an Arkansas law.
That doesn't make sense.
Red states, man. Red states.
Yep. Freaking Republicans. They try to they pretend like they don't want alcohol, but we know what's really going on. Well, actually, I don't know what's really going on. I was
going to say, good. That makes one of us, because
no, it's absolutely a lie that they're not drinking, because they're definitely drinking, but I don't know.
They just buy it all the night before.
Yeah. Oh, it's, you know what it is? It's corporate interests. That's the reason. So
I know the liquor stores around here are a big part of the reason why alcohol sales don't go through on Sunday, because they typically try to lump in like lots of different, bills that coincide with, the sale of liquor in non-liquor store environments like grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
And because of those laws, now we've got that always seems to get held up. So
Yep. And it's probably a similar situation here, although I don't follow the politics here where I live too closely.
Yeah, Caleb does not inform himself of the goings-on in the world.
Well, to be honest, there's not a lot of politicking happening here. It's pretty much very little happens. I mean, we legalized medical marijuana last year, which was cool. But
it's further along than Indiana will probably get in the next 10 years.
Probably. But, there's not a lot of people here, nor is there a lot of money. So there's not a lot of political happenings.
Actually, I think industrial marijuana is legal here now, as of last year.
I don't even know what that means.
You can use it for like hemp.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, it's something, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, what a disaster is that would be.
I'll be honest, I don't have any skin in the game. I really don't. So
the disaster that hemp, the disaster movie that we're talking about here. I'm trying to bring it back. I think industrial hemp is great. That's not what this podcast is about.
So in answer to my question, I've actually went up to Auburn, Indiana to visit my sister earlier today. So on our way back, I got a nice 44-ounce truck stop soda. So I'm drinking that. But when that's done, I have some Glenmorangie 12-year that I'm going to crack into. So.
Whoa, did you get like really big, or that Is it a tiny bottle?
It's a tiny bottle.
Okay.
I visited a buddy of mine in Nashville, and he's not a big Scotch drinker, so he gave me this little bottle that he had on his person.
Okay.
So,
Wait, whoa. What was that one again?
this is Glenmorangie. I think it's how you pronounce it. Let me get it up to.
Oh, my dad drinks that. He pronounces it Glenmorangie, but I don't know if he's right either. But
that actually makes more sense given the spelling. So maybe that's what it is.
He's a big time Scotch drinker.
This is the Nectar d'Or, the golden nectar is what it says there on the label.
Well, that sounds pretty nice. Yeah. Not gonna lie.
So I'll let you, when I get to that, I'll let you know how that is. I'm sure it'll be right in the middle of a really stirring point one of you is trying to make, and I'll go, that's some good Scotch. Then we'll stop and we'll talk about Scotch.
Of course.
It's actually, I think it's Glenmorangie.
Oh, you know, I mean,
I'm not Scottish. Well, I mean, I
Scottish.
am, but I've never been to Scotland, so I don't know how to pronounce Scottish words. I'm going to fall back on that. I know what Glen. I know how to pronounce that part, but
Nah, man.
Like Glenfiddich is probably pronounced like Glenfifth or something like that.
I believe that one's pronounced Glenfiddich.
Oh, see, I'm always wrong on these. Even when I'm trying to be right, I'm wrong. So,
but I can't vouch for that either. That's my understanding.
It looks like it's the modern pronunciation is Glenmorangie.
Oh,
okay. There you go.
So everybody's a little bit wrong.
That's what I'm gathering. Yeah.
Nobody is right.
Nobody is right.
Sweet. All right. Good thing.
Just like when it comes to your favorite disaster film. No one's right.
No one's exactly.
We have a slight different interpretation of what's a good disaster film.
Mm-hmm. We really do, and nothing is really going to bring that out quite like this episode. I have a feeling. So before we did get to that and discuss our 3 films for the episode, today I'm going to be assuming the role of genre meister, and I'm going to lay out a brief history of the disaster film genre in Hollywood. So the earliest disaster film's really been around, from what I've been able to see, as long as film. I think one of the very first ones was called Fire in 1901, one of the earliest examples of a disaster film, but they really kind of hit in the 30s. Auteurs were doing genre films then, guys like John Ford, Carol Reed were directing movies or disaster films, stuff like The Hurricane was John Ford's movie. And they kind of carried on, and you'd see kind of them here and there kind of sprinkled throughout even through the 50s. And they kind of died out for about a decade and a half, more or less, until the 70s. And the 70s is when, and pretty much just as a decade, the 70s is where the disaster film kind of took off and kind of ruled the roost. The big one is Airport, which came out in 1970 and actually sparked a 4-film franchise. Airport, Airport 75, Airport 77, and The Concorde, Airport 79. So there's 4 films, and then they went from 70 to 1979. So they fit very nicely inside that decade. But when Airport came out, it was nominated for Best Picture. It had a giant cast of just an all-star cast with Dean Martin and Burt Lancaster at the lead. And then that kind of became the mold for the disaster film through the 70s. Really big all-star casts. Kind of campy, not taking everything really super seriously. So that's, and you see a lot of that in our first film up for discussion tonight, for sure. And if you didn't see that, then you weren't looking hard enough. But that was followed, Airport was followed 2 years later by The Poseidon Adventure, which was then followed 2 years later by The Towering Inferno. And those are probably the 3 biggest ones of the genre from that decade, although Earthquake with Charlton Heston factors in there as well. And then after the various Airport sequels come out, you get the parodies. And usually when a genre starts into parodying itself, it's pretty well run its course. So by the time Airplane and Airplane 2 came out, the genre was pretty much over until the mid-90s. And I would say that Twister was probably what created the resurgence there in disaster films. And they became kind of the new blockbuster. In the 90s, that most of the big blockbusters of the late 90s were those kind of films. So you've got your Twister, your Dante's Peak, your Armageddon, your Volcano, your Deep Impact, all those films about these giant natural disasters coming to kill everybody. kind of ruled that latter half of the decade, and even snuck into the early 2000s. You've got stuff like The Day After Tomorrow, 2012, which came out I think in 2009, are probably the last two major examples that we've seen. Every now and again, you'll see kind of something else slip through, but that was kind of the dwindling down of the disaster film genre, at least with regard to natural disasters. You'll still see, I think Roland Emmerich and Michael Bay are both still making movies. So, and you can argue that every time Metropolis is destroyed, we have
Transformers is kind of a modern disaster film.
I mean, really, let's be honest.
It definitely feels like a disaster.
Every time you go. My dad was like, "Hey, we need to go see the new Transformers." I'm like, "I have not seen a Transformers movie since the second one came out, and I learned my lesson."
I'm sorry, everybody. I apologize. That was low hanging fruit, and I really shouldn't have gone there. That was too easy.
I did notice you failed to mention Independence Day when it came to 90s disaster movies.
Yeah. That's a sci-fi disaster movie. It's totally different.
So
it's
totally
mostly
different.
what I've been going through.
Twister is also a sci-fi
No,
disaster.
what are you talking about? Tornadoes are real.
Mostly what I've been talking about are natural disasters and or man-made disasters. But when you start getting into like the sci-fi aliens, Cloverfield, I also wouldn't consider a disaster film.
I would consider it a POV film.
I would consider it a disaster, but I wouldn't consider it a disaster film.
Oh, come on.
I think when it's a giant monster, it just comes into its own it comes into kaiju films.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So Twister's like a kaiju film. Actually, Dante's Peak is more like a kaiju film. But
yeah, I was gonna say that seems much more kaiju-esque than Twister does.
Oh, did you see that F5?
That's pretty sweet. Well, by this point, you've probably figured out what movies we're watching, but we're going to go ahead and talk about them anyway. I'll start because my film's up first. So our first film tonight is 1974's The Towering Inferno. When an electrical malfunction creates a fire on the 84th floor of a new luxury high-rise in the heart of San Francisco, hundreds of people are trapped inside with no easy way out. It's up to the building's architect and the beleaguered fire chief to help control the blaze and save as many as possible. Featuring an all-star cast, including Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, William Holden, Faye Dunaway, and Fred Astaire. Towering Inferno is, to date, the second and final disaster film ever nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. That is, unless you include Jaws or Titanic, which I don't. So, Caleb.
All right. Next up, we have the mid-90s classic that I guess helped reinvigorate the disaster genre. I mean, I don't have the historical backing of this.
I have to
take Steven's word for it because
do your own research.
As fact check Caleb.
Maybe you should emphasize natural disaster genre.
Okay, yes, natural disasters. Certainly, they are natural disasters. And this film is Twister. It tells the story of a ragtag group of storm chasers led by Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton as they hunt down and mercilessly slaughter tornadoes. With great supporting performances from Cary Elwes. I don't know how to say his name. Okay, Jamie Gertz, Lewis Smith, and
Lois. That's Lois.
Lois Smith, and absolutely the most important career-defining role for Philip Seymour Hoffman. And a script, yes, indeed, and a script written by novelist Michael Crichton, who I believe we all love. I think
dearly.
And then Jan de Bjon. 1996 film helped impact what disaster cinema would become moving forward. Sam?
Our final film for discussion is 1997's Dante's Peak, which stars Pierce Brosnan as volcanologist. He
works on rubber and tires.
Am I the only one who did any research on this on these movies?
I looked at
He says it in the movie. He says he's a volcanologist.
Sent to small Washington. Oh, I still can't read. Jeez. Sent to the small Washington town of Dante's Peak, which sits at the base of a dormant volcano. When his findings lead him to believe eruption is imminent, he and the town's mayor, played by post-Sarah Connor Linda Hamilton, to evacuate the city and save them and their family. Today, Dante's Peak is probably best known as one of 2 volcano movies released in 1997, the other being Volcano, starring Tommy Lee Jones and Hetch and Don Cheadle. Heish and Don Cheadle.
It is pronounced Heish, by the way.
And Hetchy. It's okay.
Well,
no one's ever
nice
heard her again.
Well,
Whatever. What else has she ever been in? It's okay.
No, it's. I mean, fair point. She was really like popular there in the late '90s, and then she evaporated.
Yeah.
She was in the Gus Van Sant Psycho, though.
Yeah, but no, we don't talk about that one. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that, Steven.
Just saying.
We don't talk about that.
So, taken from the, just to take it before we get really started into the conversation, I think this is the very first episode of Rule of Thirds where none of the films that we are talking about today were directed by a director we would consider to be an auteur. Mainly because there aren't a lot of disaster films directed by auteurs. Like we said, maybe a few from the early days, the 30s through the 50s. But why do you think it is that auteur directors tend to not be drawn much to the disaster film?
Paul W.S. Anderson. Which Anderson? Who did Pompeii?
Was it Wes Anderson? Was it?
No, Wes Anderson did not direct Pompeii.
Okay.
Also,
that would be a really quirky movie.
Paul W.S. Anderson. Yeah. Wait, which one's? Oh, never mind. Paul W.S. Anderson. I always get him and Paul Thomas Anderson confused.
Dude, okay, come on. He's an auteur. He did the Death Race remake. That was
Alien versus Predator, a couple Resident Evil movies. I mean, come on.
All of Resident Evil, every Resident Evil movie, all goodness. 27 of them. Is he gonna do the new reboot of Resident Evil that they're doing?
I hope not.
I hope so.
Part of me also hopes so. He is underrated, but we can talk about that in another podcast. What matters is that I totally got him confused with the other Paul Anderson, the superior Paul Anderson.
Mm-hmm. Oh, undeniably.
So yeah, no, I reneged my statement about auteur directors, except for I think Steven Soderbergh did a disaster movie at some point.
Traffic doesn't count.
Yeah,
but no, but I think we can agree that not a lot of auteurs are directing disaster movies. My question is, why do we think that is?
Probably because disasters are such it's such a basic bitch thing to make a movie out of, like a story out of. Okay. That maybe people are just kind of like, I'll show,
Explain what you mean by that.
No soul, I don't know. Like the driving force behind a disaster film is always just some sort of big explodey, fireball thing of some sort. Yeah. And I think it just like inherently is like a less refined story that you're telling. Like you could do amazing things with it if you were inspired to. It could be a really good character drama or something, but it just doesn't seem like it seems like a really pedestrian place to start from.
It's typically, they're typically grade A Hollywood cheese.
Yeah.
Like I love the movies we watch, but I mean, they're definitely flawed as far as artistic merit goes.
Well, some of them are flawed. Like 2 of them are flawed.
No,
Twister,
I think there are plenty of flaws to go around.
Twister has some serious issues.
One of them is perfect.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of nitpicking in this episode. So
Oh yeah. Twister has some issues.
If nitpicking is not your thing, maybe go to the end and we'll recap.
If some of us are still alive.
No, you're gonna love this episode. It's gonna be the best.
We're in 3. This may be the first episode where there's actual debate going on the podcast, because usually we always say, "Oh, there's going to be debate," and then we never end up fighting about anything. Yeah. This may be the change.
What were we talking about? Oh yes, grade A Hollywood cheese. But here's the thing: when you try to do a good, like, character-driven disaster movie, you get the Godzilla 2014 movie. That's what you get. That's what you get.
Okay, it's okay, but that's like
when
you try and fail. Like when you try and fail, is that what you're saying? Because
what I'm saying is, if you try, you're gonna fail.
Oh, so
you would see failure then as an inevitability.
Yeah. Unless you really like sit down and think Bryan Cranston needs to fight all the natural disasters and like focus on Bryan Cranston fighting all natural disasters, you're gonna fail.
Right.
I would watch that movie.
If you have the idea that you're gonna bring Bryan Cranston in and then kill him off within 15 minutes, then you're going to fail for sure.
If not less.
If that was your idea, then I'm sorry. That's a bad idea.
It's a very bad idea.
Yeah.
Well, I've got another question I'm saving to the end here, specifically regarding our individual approaches to the disaster film, ideal approaches to the disaster film. So let's actually just move on and start discussing the films themselves at this point. So what were your general thoughts on the Towering Inferno, 1974?
It was boring. And then when I read a lot of the stuff about Steve McQueen on the set, I realized this is basically the Magnificent Seven. Because it's like the exact same drama with that guy.
The funny thing is, Magnificent Seven is happening at the beginning of McQueen's career. This one is happening toward the end. He only makes like 2 or 3 movies after this, and then he's dead. So, it just goes to show you that from beginning to end, the man's career really didn't change.
Did he die in a car accident?
I don't remember. I think he had cancer.
Maybe. But no. But like,
fact check, Caleb. Check those facts.
Because the same drama he has with who's the guy? Who's the other lead?
Paul Newman.
Paul Newman. The same drama with Paul Newman he had with Reiner.
Yul Brynner.
Yul Brynner. It's the exact same drama. Like, to the point where like he had to have like the same amount of like lines as Paul Newman.
Exactly. And then he made sure that most of Paul Newman's were taken up in the first 45 minutes of the film.
Exactly. So
before his character even shows up.
Exactly.
Because I clocked it. His character doesn't show up till almost 45 minutes in to it. So, and Paul Newman is pretty much the only one on screen for the first 45 minutes. I mean, you check in, you meet a lot of the other people, but he's kind of the lead guy that you're following through all of that. So
yeah, he definitely, Steve McQueen comes off as a little bitch. I'm going to be honest.
Basically, yeah.
Fact check Caleb has the answer. Steve McQueen died of mesothelioma from inhaling massive amounts of asbestos as doing soundproofing early in his life.
Oh,
doing soundstage soundproofing and stuff.
Okay.
Yep, asbestos. It kills Steve McQueen.
Well, probably anything can kill Steve McQueen. Not giving him enough lines will kill Steve McQueen. I'm sorry to all you diehard Steve McQueen fans out there, but
too soon, Sam.
Steve McQueen is objectively awesome, but and this to kind of piggyback on the Steve McQueen drama, his feuding with Newman is created one of the first instances of staggered billing in the film. So if you look at it, Paul Newman's name is listed first, but it's lower on the screen than McQueen's. McQueen's name is higher, but it's to the right. So depending on how you read it, both names are top billed. And that ended up being used a lot moving forward, particularly when you have stars and celebrities that are at odds with each other over who gets top billing. You could argue either way, well, his name's further to the left, that means he's top billed, or his name's higher up, that means he's top billed. That gets used a lot, and this is kind of one of the earliest instances of that being used in Hollywood. Which I find pretty interesting.
It's funny how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Does that matter at all?
Oh yeah, it's in their contracts. It's like a Screen Actors Guild like stuff right there.
It's mostly an ego thing, but yeah.
Like I can imagine that it mattered at one point whenever people actually cared about actors, but I really feel like nobody cares about actors anymore.
I don't think it matters
to that point.
Yeah, I don't think it matters as much anymore.
Because like nobody's like looking to see who's the top billed actor in a movie. You just go to see a movie because it has explosions that you like.
There are some actors who can still command people's attention and get butts in seats. DiCaprio, I think, is one of those. A ton of people saw Revenant for no other reason than the buzz that this was going to be the film that won him the Oscar. Yeah. And I'm convinced partly that that's the reason he ended up winning the Oscar. Will Smith used to have that kind of draw. I doubt that he does anymore. But I know
that might keep butts out of seats. It's like, oh, Will Smith is in this movie.
Everything after Earth is kind of one of those like.
I think I Am Legend kind of killed his career.
I think he killed I Am. It wasn't his fault, but they killed I Am Legend.
It was not his fault. No.
And then that killed his career.
No,
so it
but
seems
yes,
pretty appropriate.
billing. Going back to the thing, yes, like the actual billing, like the order in which your name appears in credits is actually important. Ridiculous, but because to us plebes, us peasants.
Yeah, to us peons, it doesn't really matter.
Peons,
but to
yes,
the people whose names get up there, then yeah, it does.
Yeah. But the movie itself,
yeah,
great premise. Way too long. Way too long.
I will defend its running time.
That's fine. I think it didn't have any kind of like really plot character driven stuff going on. The disaster wasn't that complicated to happen. It could have been done in like half the time it was.
This movie's like this. This movie's like proto. This movie is like a proto Die Hard movie where the terrorists are fire.
I mean, the main nemesis is other than man's hubris is in fact fire.
Yeah. Which I guess fire can be slow, so I guess you have that. You have to you have a long burning time.
I don't know, man. Once the fire gets to the flashover point, it's fast. You know, it's slow at first, but man, it really picks up towards the end. And this movie didn't quite track with what fire would have done.
The initial sparks is set off at the 15-minute mark. Mm-hmm. Because I clocked it. And I'm like...
And there's like 3.5 hours of movie after that before the fire even gets to like a dangerous place.
So how did that... Yes, that was my thing too. It sparks 15 minutes in. I'm like, oh crap. And then it is like, how many minutes is it before the fire starts? Before they open the door and everything explodes. How is it burning that long? It was like an entire...
It's contained in that room. And then they go up to check on it. They open the door and it sears that one dude's flesh off.
Hey, how did they not have smoke alarms? I mean, I understand that this place was built. Okay, every smoke alarm, also every heat-based sprinkler system was malfunctioning too. Like this is like,
did they have heat-based sprinkler systems in the 70s?
Yeah, that's like the earliest technology that ever existed. The way heat-based sprinkler systems work is they have a piece of glass with a air bubble inside of them, and whenever it gets hot enough, the glass shatters, and then that releases the valve to allow water to flow. They've had that technology since like the 20s. It's ancient technology, and it's completely analog, and it shouldn't fail. Like there's no way that a heat-based sprinkler system would just not work. So this movie fails on that premise alone. So I give Towering Inferno 0 out of 10.
Well, I was confused too. Like, how did the fire stay within that small closet for that many hours still on fire without heating something else around?
I know, because like a whole party like arrived and then got going, and then it was going for a while.
Well, and it was more that it ended up within that room. When it started to spread, it spread across the floor and then slowly managed to make its way up. The timeline is probably the one thing that is off about the movie, but I will defend the running time if for no other reason than with a movie with a cast this large and with as many storylines, as many plates spinning that this film is trying to keep going, you really need that time to make sure that every plot is fully serviced, because you've got the kids. You've got the lady that finds the kids and Fred Astaire, the con man. You've got the builder and his relationship with his daughter and son-in-law. You've got Faye Dunaway, her relationship with Paul Newman. You've got the fire chief, his relationship with Paul Newman. You've got O.J. Simpson running around saving cats for reasons that are all his own.
You've got that one couple who are like they serve only one purpose, which is to be a couple that exists and who are sneaking away to get it on, and then they get burned up.
That couple exist, and that is a horror / disaster film trope, and it's used again in Dante's Peak, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Oh yeah,
and it's used in Jaws too. I mean, that's what ends up ultimately kicking off Jaws as well. So It's just kind of one of those, the and they're in fairness, because they die so soon, their plot is wrapped up relatively quickly.
It is, but in Dante's Peak, which I don't want to get too deep into it real quick, but that plot was started, that little tiny little subplot, little story. Was started and then ended within 1 minute of itself, which is normal for that type of plot. This one, they started this the beginning of this plot like 30 minutes into the movie, and then it wasn't even resolved for like an hour. So they spent way more time than traditionally is spent on that particular.
Because one of those
trope.
guys is Robert Wagner, who was a huge TV star at the time.
Oh, I see.
He also played number 2 in the Austin Powers movies.
Sounds like some decisions were made on this movie that didn't never necessarily happen in service of the film itself, but rather interests of actors who were in it.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, this film was really well received. This is kind of a proto blockbuster. So before movies were, I mean, because Jaws we credit with kicking off the summer blockbuster and what it was. But before Jaws, these disaster films, these star-studded disaster films were really kind of the proto blockbuster. These were the movies that would get people out because the stakes were usually pretty high. It had all of your favorite celebrities in it. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, the only thing in thinking about it, the only thing that really came close to a modern analog for that in my mind is the Fast and the Furious series, because you've got, big name stars of the day, The Rock, Vin Diesel, Jason Statham.
Seen Fast and the Furious series.
I know enough about it to make the comparison.
The Rock showed up in Fast 5.
He knows enough.
But he's a big name star who is brought into the film.
Yeah,
whatever.
You've got.
I wonder who would have shown up in Towering Inferno 5.
I mean, just look at Russell.
Look
at the airport films for your analog, guys. Look at the airport films for your series analog. But you've got your up-and-comers, your Gal Gadot, your Tyrese Gibson, your established decorated stars of years past, Helen Mirren, Charlize Theron, Kurt Russell. And then you've also got celebrities from non-acting disciplines like music and sports, Ludacris, Bow Wow, Ronda Rousey, all showing up in those Fast and Furious films. And you've pretty much got that here. I mean, you've got singers, you've got dancers, you've got stars from Hollywood's yesteryear and Jennifer Jones and Fred Astaire. You've got O.J. Simpson, who's pretty much just a football player before this movie. You've got, the biggest stars of the time, Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, Faye Dunaway, who's just a couple years away from her Oscar. This is a big year for Dunaway because she was also in Chinatown this year, nominated for her first Best Actress trophy. So, I mean, you've got these really big name stars, even down to the little boy who's played by Bobby Brady, for heaven's sake. I mean, it's a really big cast. There's a lot of egos, a lot of plates to keep spinning. And so to my thinking, the only thing that really mirrors putting together a cast that large in service of a single story would be that we have in our time today would be a Fast and Furious movie.
Well,
okay. I'll give it to you, but we needed more fire and more action.
I would say it's an I would say that Expendables is the movie you should compare.
But they're not coming from all the same genre.
All the star-studded cast that goes into Expendables. They're definitely not washed-up actors who have nothing better to do.
I don't know that it's fair to call all of these people washed up.
I see what
I don't know, man.
I see what you're. Yeah, I don't know who is not washed up. I see what you're saying though, but still, it was so slow and boring. It was a slow burning movie.
Oh,
well, you did. It's there,
but not to benefit it. Yeah.
Ooh, that is
also who? Okay, I've never built a skyscraper before. Okay, never.
Thank heaven.
Okay, but with that being said, I've watched some Discovery Channel videos about building skyscrapers,
which makes you our resident expert.
And I'm pretty sure that I can't think of any circumstance under which they would have a barrel of Quikrete up in a stairwell in a skyscraper. Like, that's not how they build They don't have barrels of Quikrete that they're pouring into floors, okay? They have, like, high-rise, like, crane-powered, gravity-fed cement mechanisms. They're not carton barrels of Quikrete around. So, bam, plot hole.
Are they not at the time?
They had a service elevator, A, which was probably what they used, and B, the building was just open. They hadn't finished everything, which is, again, part of the problem.
Right, but at no point are you running around with a barrel of Quikrete while you're building a building, because that's not the kind of concrete they use. Like, you don't put concrete into a barrel and cart it around when you're building a building. That's just not how that happens.
I think you're putting emphasis.
You don't. But the people who made the glass tower in San Francisco certainly did. And who are you to judge them, Caleb?
Look what happened. They called it the Unsinkable Tower.
Yes, I believe that's what it was.
I actually did have a note that said this seems to be very much like Titanic in the middle of land.
It's Skytanic.
Skytanic, yes. Very good. That should have been the name of the movie. But these people are ill prepared for an atrocity, and when it inevitably befalls them, they're doomed. So, I mean, it seems very much kind of a Skytanic sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even God couldn't sink this tower.
Famous last words. Can I just tell you that I was really excited when Richard Chamberlain finally kicked it?
Is he the one who?
Is he the electrician?
He's the son-in-law.
I don't know any of the actors. Okay, so he's the electrician guy, the electrical engineer.
Yeah. Just that weaselly little punk.
Can we all thank God that when the helicopter army, like the army guys in the helicopter, shot that rope over to the tower, everyone knew exactly how to tie it to stuff.
I really
knew how to.
Honestly, I really feel like they didn't, because it looked like a really half-assed tying stuff to things situation. I feel like the firefighter was like, okay, go over there and throw it over that beam. And then they did. And then whenever they got back with it, they just kind of like ad-libbed the whole thing. And I was looking at these knots and I was like, that doesn't even look like a knot.
That's a tangle. A lot of faith in that tangle there.
So Sam, I understand what you're saying, but I honestly think that if you really watch it, it looks like that there's a bunch of people who have no idea what they're doing.
But see, I was in the illusion. I got sucked into the illusion. So to me, it looked like they knew exactly what they were doing.
See, and I'm willing to suspend.
It was adrenaline, Sam. The adrenaline kicked in and created the knowledge they needed.
I'm willing to suspend some disbelief in service of the film. There was one area where I was just like, I don't understand how that works, which was their master plan of blowing the tanks at the top of the building to kill the fire inside the building.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was thinking about that, Steven. And I was thinking, what would probably happen if you blew the tanks at the top of the building is that the water would probably take the path of least resistance, which would probably be out the side of the building.
That's what I thought as well.
And then all the special effects showed water pouring out the sides of the building. I was like, yep, that seems like what I would think would happen. And then somehow the fire went out anyway.
Yeah, and for all the times when when I hate Neil deGrasse Tyson coming in and say, well, actually, scientifically, I was kind of like, where is perennial killjoy Neil deGrasse Tyson when you need him?
Yeah, I mean, he should have been in this movie. I mean, it had the cast. He could have used.
I don't think anyone knew who he was in 1974.
Well, he
sure didn't know who O.J. Simpson was.
Probably around.
Yeah, I mean, but doesn't his saving that cat just make up for any horrible thing that he might have done later in life?
Any and every horrible thing, because this movie where he was just an actor and he did what he was told to do on the script, that's a good deed that should go unpunished.
Okay, I'm glad we're all in agreement there. Good. I'm happy. No, I enjoyed this movie for what it was. It was long, but again, I think you needed that length to make sure that all the stories here were serviced properly. Maybe it didn't need to be 2 hours, 45 minutes long, but I think it worked really well. I mean, you've got a huge cast, you've got a lot of storylines going on, and you've got disaster that honestly in real life they'd probably be standing out on the street for several hours while this thing was fought. So
I kind of think
this scenario is definitely realistic and very, I guess the length also helps with it, because you're right, like in the real life scenario it would be several hours, so I guess you can just have all these hours, these people running around trying to figure shit out.
It should have been filmed like an episode of 24.
Oh, we'd still be watching it if that were the case. But I mean, it is particularly eerie, and we were kind of talking about this a little bit before we went on mic. That just in the time that we're recording this, you guys will get this a couple weeks from now, but in the time that we were recording this, just last week, there was a high-rise apartment in Great Britain in London, actually, that caught fire. And it was like 2 days before I sat down to watch this movie for this podcast. And I just remember thinking, oh no. Because it's 1974, we're 2017, 43 years later, and we're still, running into issues of, or I guess it would be, 43 years later. And high-rise fires are still an issue and still as pertinent then as they are now. So I don't know. I found it really eerie and very disconcerting. I don't want to make light of what happened in London because I think that was an absolute tragedy. But the timing was a little too uncomfortable for me.
And the thing is they're both disasters, probably because of human interference.
Human error, human hubris. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like that somebody didn't call Steve McQueen after all.
Well, he was dead due to human error with asbestos.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Someone thought that was safe at one point in time. So,
jeez, are we ever going to survive this
it's
planet?
such a good insulator. Oh, and topical also, asbestos is an incredible fire retardant. It doesn't burn. So, the thing that killed Steve McQueen is also the thing that would have saved the glass tower.
Except it's an insulator, and I mean, there's not really much insulation in glass, but.
Well, no, but I'm just saying if they just had asbestos just everywhere, then the building wouldn't. If they made the entire building out of asbestos, nothing could burn.
Yeah, and then everyone inside of it would have died of mesothelioma. Instead.
Not true. You only get mesothelioma if you breathe asbestos dust. So as long as it's pressed into solid products that are not being like disturbed, such as like hard pressed shingles and stuff like that, it's not a problem. So I think we should just build all buildings out of asbestos and then just be very serious about no drilling. You can't drill. You need to hang a picture. Sorry, you can't do that. No pictures.
That seems a little unreasonable, Caleb.
For the next, ladies and gentlemen, for the next episode of Caleb Solves the World's Problems by killing us all horribly.
No, you won't die. You just can't hang any pictures. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but okay.
Just can't hang any pictures. That's all.
No, one person's gonna hang a picture, go against the grain, hang a picture, and then you have the asbestos disaster film.
That's true.
Very slow, very very slow.
Asbestos out. That'll be like a 4,000 hour long movie.
I don't know, film it like they did the 12 Years a Boy or whatever.
Boyhood,
yeah.
12 Years a Boy.
I think it's combined two movies. Anyways,
yes, you did. Boy, did you!
They'll do it like that. They'll just film it every few years, and then eventually, after like a few years, the people will be dead.
On that note, one thing I do want to say is that there was an emergency on set. One of the fires got a little out of control, and they actually had to call the real fire department. And Steve McQueen, in costume as the fire chief, is helping the actual firefighters put out the fire. And one of the firefighters turns to Steve McQueen and says, "My wife's not going to believe this." And Steve McQueen looks to the firefighter and says, "Neither will mine."
And at that point, they swap places.
Right.
Because they looked exactly alike.
And yes, and so instead of the prince and the pauper, it's the actor and the fireman.
And it turns out that Steve McQueen is still alive to this day, did not die of asbestos. And
isn't this the plot of Bubba Hotep?
Almost.
Yeah, almost.
Not quite. getting close there.
There are some additional factors to Bubba Hotep.
That's a movie we need to do for this podcast sometime. That's a fun movie.
Don Coscarelli. I love Don Coscarelli. He's my favorite. Anyways.
Anything else on the Towering Inferno before we move on, gentlemen?
I don't think I didn't hate it. I feel that Sam, I feel like I'm getting vibes that Sam kind of didn't like this movie at all. Whereas I kind of didn't hate it. I just thought it was.
I feel the exact same way about Sam's pick for this episode. So
I feel like it was. I feel like it's a little too long. Definitely. Well, not a little too long. I think it's probably about an hour too long at least. They probably could have cut out a lot of subplots, and it would have been just fine without them. But otherwise, oh man, why'd they kill the one lady?
Jennifer Jones.
Why'd they kill the one that saved the kids? Like that just seemed like such a that didn't need to happen. that just didn't need to happen.
For the same reason they killed the grandmother in Dante's Inferno.
No, that was a terrible character. We can come back to that. Let's do Twister next.
Okay.
What's hilarious? There's a character they didn't need to kill in Twister that pissed me off that they killed.
I mean, they killed so many people, and she didn't really feel like she needed to die. And the circumstances under which she died in this movie, it's just like so. It's like she just happened to be the one that was standing next to the window that fell out of the friggin' scenic elevator. I just felt like that was just such a oh, come on, man. And it was so bad taste. She fell and tumbled and then impacted the side of the building. It was bad taste.
That was a little much.
It was in bad taste. She didn't have to die. I think that she should have been one of the people who lived. It just, man, screw this movie. I loved how the senator too. Why did he have to die? He was cool. He was a badass.
He was like Robert Vaughn, also of the Magnificent Seven.
He was like cool and like calm and collected and knew what was going on. He wasn't an asshole. He wasn't trying to save himself. He was like freaking sweet, awesome dude. And then he just gets like kicked off the side of the freaking little ski lift,
trying to get the weasel off the chair so someone else could use it.
Right.
He died trying to save other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
that's what we call a hero.
I think he's a hero.
That's the right way to look at it.
But I was bummed out that he died, though, because, he was cool. I liked him.
I was going to bring us back to another modern disaster movie in which a female character who was supposed to take care of 2 kids is just mercilessly, brutally murdered, and that was in Jurassic World. That lady who got killed by the pterodactyls.
More sci-fi than...
Yeah, I don't know why I keep thinking these are separate genres. Disaster film's like a subgenre of sci-fi, bro. It's like action sci-fi. Anyways, Jurassic World. Jurassic Park can be considered a disaster movie.
I guess it kind of is sci-fi because if you think about it, sci-fi doesn't just mean like crazy like aliens and genetic mutation and stuff. Sci-fi also means like things that are scientifically like conceivable that also, you make a story out of it.
Some of these natural disasters would be more considered hard science fiction leaning, but science fiction includes things that could possibly conceivably happen.
Like Jules Verne. Jules Verne is hard science fiction. These disaster movies are like Jules Verne.
Yeah. So
I don't know that I buy that.
Well, I have actually studied the genre pretty extensively. It's pretty important because, like, growing up, that's what I read was hard science fiction from Michael Crichton.
It sounds like,
Verne.
I mean, you think about it. These disaster movies are science-based fiction.
Yeah, that is what science fiction is. You can argue that, but you are actually wrong. Have you ever read Jules Verne?
Yeah.
Have you ever read? Yeah.
My first book report was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Okay, there you go. Hardest science fiction book ever. But
fish biology.
Fish biology.
Fish
the
biology.
Book. The adventure book. Anyways, no, what was I saying? Yes, no, but Jurassic World, there was that chick that got killed by the pterodactyls and then eaten by the fish dinosaur. That was pretty brutal. She didn't need to die like that. I was just trying to make a connection.
Much maligned death in modern cinema.
Yes, a lot of people are pissed off, and rightfully so. I'm just trying to make a modern connection, guys.
Yeah.
So Twister. I'm sorry, Caleb.
I guess we're done with Towering Inferno.
No, I mean, if you have more to say, then by all means say it.
No, I guess we're done with it. I mean, one thing that I didn't like is how there were other unresolved plot threads. There were so many little subplots that they took so much of my effing time, Steven, to wrap up. But then there were other potential subplots they just didn't even touch.
Such as
I want to know who's responsible for apparently not installing any smoke detectors. Why isn't that guy in there and burning up alive?
William Holden,
I want to know. I want to know who's responsible for not installing any any water sprinklers.
William Holden. Next question.
Who's William Holden? Who's that? Who is it? No.
The guy who cut corners at every turn.
Yeah, but we have a specific villain in the nephew, who, or not nephew, but son-in-law. Who we know cut corners on
someone you don't care if he dies, because even his own wife's like, we're pretty much done, right?
Right, I understand.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, she's like, I mean, there's no point in being married anymore, right?
Yeah,
and you're like,
he's either going to totally redeem
oh.
himself or continue down that path
Right.
of
and
regrettable decisions.
When he went down the stairs, and he was like, I was like, okay, this guy's either going to die now, or he's going to like come back up, and then he's going to be like, oh man, I suck, and then he's going to reevaluate his life and maybe be a hero in the end, and then he totally wasn't. And I was like, well, that really sucks.
He did come back up, but he did not reevaluate anything.
He had a chance. Can we not agree that he had a chance to reevaluate his life choices and become a hero? And then he totally squandered that chance.
It's because he kept drinking.
He became the ultimate villain, really, because he defied the because he cut in line. And there's nothing worse than cutting in line.
You're not wrong.
You know,
and alcohol definitely led to that bad decision, as it leads to all bad decisions. So, gentlemen, to bad decisions.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's really all I had to say about Towering Inferno, unless I think of something else later.
We can always circle back around to Towering Inferno. It's a 2-hour, 45-minute movie.
We'll make this 2-hour and 45-minute conversation about Towering Inferno. But I want to circle back to something. According to Wikipedia, disaster films are a subgenre of science fiction.
Yeah, as we know, Wikipedia is the most accurate, constantly peer-reviewed encyclopedia in existence.
Now, Wikipedia also said that Titanic is responsible for reinvigorating the disaster film genre in 1997.
What I'm trying to get at is we need to expand Steven's mind, because I think he has a very narrow mind of what science fiction is.
I think an argument could be made for Titanic just because of... Hey. I know. It's just what you're saying is not important.
No. What I'm saying is way more important what you're saying. Because science fiction is probably one of the biggest genres out there because it encompasses so much.
Yeah, it's true. But Steven, to your point about Wikipedia and Titanic, I think it could be argued that Titanic did reinvigorate the disaster movie genre because of how successful Titanic was. While Twister came before it, Titanic's success was on a level that had never been seen before. So... you could argue. I mean, I think it falls into the realm of disaster movie. It ticks a lot of the boxes, and I think that in terms of success, it's unreal. It's like nothing else. So, I think it could be argued that 1997, that Twister maybe kind of kicked off the idea, but that Titanic probably is the one that sealed the deal, just because of how ridiculously successful it was.
Well, and you've also got Titanic didn't come out till the end of the year, and both Dante's Peak and Volcano, to name just those two, both came out long, because the Volcano was February, Dante's Peak was April, and then Titanic wasn't until November.
Yeah,
November
but Titanic
release?
made like $1 billion in
Titanic was the highest grossing movie of all time upon its release. Yes.
Well,
it remained the highest grossing movie of all time until Avatar, right?
Until Avatar, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
Cameron. I hate James Cameron. I want him to die.
We should totally do all of his movies for this podcast.
That sounds awful.
No, I don't want to do that.
Anyways, no, what was I going to say? I feel like nothing reinvigorated the disaster film, I think, because they seem like all these movies just kind of came out at the same time. Because movies take a long time to be made. No one watched Twister. They're like, okay, let's make Titanic real quick. All these movies.
I don't know, unless there was corporate espionage.
Yeah, and it's possible. I mean, think about Volcano and Dante's Peak fighting each other.
Yeah.
Or Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it definitely exists, but I think they just all reinvigorated each other. It just happened. Nothing said it. Nothing happened specifically made everyone follow through. It was a lot of ideas floated, and then everyone attacking them differently at the same time.
But ultimately, what continues to get made is based on what the audience wants to see.
So we had like 10 really successful disaster movies, and we'll keep making them. But I wouldn't narrow it down to any one disaster movie that would have reinvigorated it. Because, I mean, the three big ones, Twister, Independence Day, and Titanic, came out in the same year. They were definitely not – no one saw Twister, then decided to make Independence Day, then decided to make Titanic.
Right, those were already in production.
All of them were in production at the same time. Yeah, movies take a while to be made, especially on that scale. All the special effects and stuff. So all these movies have been being made for a long time before this happened, and then it's all coming out at the same time.
Really, I think nothing could really be said to be invigorating it, except for from the perspective of the audience. Mm-hmm. Whereas you could say it invigorated interest, but I mean.
Led to watching more of those movies, but those movies are all coming out at the same time anyways.
Right, like The Day After Tomorrow in 2012 and like all of those early 2000s disaster movies probably were a result of the success of these mid to late 90s disaster films. But, the mid to late 90s disaster films probably had no influence on one another at all.
Until the following years.
Right.
All right.
I feel like Steven's disagreeing with
but...
all of our logic here. Do you know how movies are made, Steven? Do you know what science fiction is? Have you read a book?
Have I read a book? I've read War and Peace. What have you done with your life?
Okay, so Steven has read one book. It was War and Peace.
It took a long time.
Probably not a good choice.
It took a long time to get through it.
Understandable that it's the only book he read because
he's been reading it since middle school.
Yep.
Just finished it 2 months ago.
Took me 4 months to read War and Peace. It's an easy read.
It's fast, is it?
It's a really easy read.
I've never read it.
You should. It's wonderful.
I read the first page.
Best book I've ever read. Who wrote it? Leo Tolstoy.
Yeah. Okay, I've been meaning to actually check his stuff out because he's your favorite author, isn't he?
He is my favorite author. Because of War and Peace, largely.
I've been meaning to check
Did you ever read Ulysses?
I started it. That's a tough read. That's
oh my gosh, same here. I started it.
I got about 100 pages in, and I was like,
"Oh, you did way better than me." I got about 25 pages in, and I was like, "Who the fuck is talking right now?" I didn't know. I had no idea who the characters were.
It's one that I fully intend to get back into at some point, but I'm gonna need some kind of companion to help me through that because please, a strategy guide. A strategy guide is something.
Needed.
Yeah,
I say we do a sub podcast where we all read it.
Understanding Ulysses with the rule of thirds, guys.
Anyway,
I don't think we're qualified. A
rule of thirds subcast, and we're not qualified to talk about movies either, and yet here we are.
That's true. What are our credentials?
Well, let's move on.
Yeah, let's sweep that under the rug. We watch a lot of movies, I guess. Well, Sam and I do. Caleb hates movies.
Some people do. I hate movies. Freaking hate them. They're the worst. I
These...
dread this podcast every single time it records. I'm like, oh man, I gotta watch movies. Damn it!
I'm excited about next month. So let's move on.
I'm excited about next month too for multiple reasons.
I don't know what next month is.
Twister.
Yes, Twister is the 1996 film starring the late, great Bill Paxton, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. And others that I can't remember who it is that's dead, but it's most of them. Not Helen Hunt. She's alive.
It's not most of them at all.
Last time I checked, she's alive.
Helen Hunt's still around. I hope nothing horrible happens to her in the next 2 weeks when this podcast comes out.
Right. That would be embarrassing for us. We'd have to release a retraction. And
I'd have to record something at the front of the podcast and be like, hey, sorry, we didn't know.
Yeah, and Sam would have to edit it in, which we'll see if that happens.
Well,
moving on.
So anyway, yes. Hey, what do you guys think about Twister? Because I think
I love Twister it. It is my favorite. It is my favorite natural disaster movie.
Yeah.
To make that separate, because to me, Independence Day will forever be the greatest. But Twister is my favorite natural disaster movie.
It has the greatest speech of all time, for sure.
Yeah.
Independence Day.
Okay, no. But Twister, like, it's got a great cast.
I don't know. Have you listened to Philip Seymour Hoffman's Suck Zone speech lately? Because that's pretty.
You know what? That's a pretty awe-inspiring speech.
But I love it.
Suck Zone, Steven. It's the zone in which the tornado sucks you up. That's not the technical term.
I mean, no, I like it because it's like a horror movie.
It is. Oh my god!
The Twister's like monsters. The way it's like directed and like cut together and like stylized, they're like monsters.
very much so.
Twister has the best soundtrack. Soundtrack.
Definitely.
Oh my gosh! Such a good soundtrack.
My favorite part is when they played Lisa Loeb.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does it have great, great music spanning various, eras and very much time appropriate music. Wonderful, great, rockin' and rollin', Van Halen and others.
The actual theme song was pretty cool.
But yes, the actual like main theme, the twist, the sound, the kind of Twister sound, the rising and falling like cellos or violins or whatever it is, it's just a really unnerving soundtrack. It's freaking great. I love it. And then
and then even
like
the upbeat parts where like they're fun and their cars like driving and having fun and adventures. I love it. It's like a fun romp.
Yeah, it's
great.
like okay, so like these other movies, it's like the natural disaster is this thing that's like being built up to, and then it breaks out, and then it's like happening, and they're like trying to deal with it. It's like a climactic thing, but in Twister, it's like the natural disaster is a bunch of natural disasters that are happening, kind of in self-contained things, and sometimes they're chasing the disaster, and sometimes the disaster just shows up on them. But it's not like this individual thing that you're building up to. There's no like focal point of this disaster. It's all over the place. So it makes for a more exciting like adventure. They're not confined to a space and trying to get out of it. They're like all over the place and trying to solve their own, like complete their own objectives separate from escaping the natural disaster, because they're actually hunting it down. It's a different dynamic than the other two movies, and I freaking love it.
Okay, but I have a question though. Why do y'all call Billy the Extreme?
Because Billy is the extreme. I mean, that's really all you have to say. This
is I always forget how just insanely quotable this movie is, but it is.
It is.
I mean, stuff that I use on a daily basis. Like if I don't know where I'm going, I will call the road Bob's Road.
Dude, we crave sustenance. Food.
Food.
Food. Food. Oh yeah. Hand gestures. Hand gestures. You get hand gestures out of this movie.
No one did hand gestures quite like PSH. I'm just.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like, okay, I don't think anybody like really considers this role to be like a standout role for him. I don't know. I don't.
It's the role that put him on the map, man.
But it freaking is. It's such a great role for him. He just owns it so completely.
After this, so he follows this up with Boogie Nights, The Big Lebowski, Patch Adams, and Magnolia.
Okay.
Within the next 3 years, that's 4 classic films by auteur directors.
So before that, what was Philip Seymour Hoffman doing?
He was, honestly, he had done a couple of minor roles in a couple of smaller PTA films. I think he had done Hard 8.
Parent-Teacher Association, I believe, is what it's called.
I see what you're saying.
I did too, but
I got that.
Doing the right way. Because we established on this podcast that Caleb is not funny.
What's a PTA film?
Sam,
Paul Thomas Anderson.
The Paul W.S. Anderson movie.
Oh, okay.
Not Paul W.S. Anderson.
Right. Wes Anderson movie. I get it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you guys are going to give me an embolism.
So anyway, Stephen, you were saying about Philip Seymour Hoffman's esteemed career.
It had mostly just been, I mean, really small. He had a small role in a really crappy zombie comedy called My Boyfriend's Back, in which he played a jock. I remember when he died, they did an interview with Bob Balaban, who directed that movie. And he said that on set, Philip Seymour Hoffman pulled him aside and was like, "Hey, Bob, man, I can do other stuff. This is not all that I do. I would love to get a chance to show you what I can actually do in a movie." And I don't think Bob Balaban ever worked with him again, but slowly over the course of the next several years, he really began to show what he could do. I mean, he had been in the TV movie The Yearling, which I remember seeing. I had forgotten he was in that. He was on an episode of Law and Order in 1991. He had a small role in the movie that finally won Al Pacino his Oscar, Scent of a Woman. He was in the movie When a Man Loves a Woman. I mean, he had a few roles, but after this, things begin to escalate for him very quickly. After Magnolia, he's doing The Talented Mr. Ripley. He does Almost Famous, Punch Drunk Love, another PTA film, Paul Thomas Anderson.
Right, I got it now. It now.
Red Dragon, 25th Hour. So from here, his career only starts building. Cold Mountain, Along Came Polly, Strangers with Candy. Philip Seymour Hoffman was never a household name, but this is the film that really gets him noticed and gets other people starting to put him in other things. This, I would say, and possibly also Boogie Nights, are the two films that really start to kind of push him out to the forefront.
I mean, I really feel.
Do what?
I need to watch Red Dragon again. I forgot he was in that. That's two phenomenal actors. Three phenomenal actors in that movie.
Yeah.
Definitely. 4. Yeah, that's definitely the better Hannibal Lecter movie.
I really do feel like this was a fantastic role for Philip Seymour Hoffman, because he's got the most character out of any character in this particular film. He
plays everything so far over the top,
right?
But it still seems grounded in a very.
It's almost like he's the
place.
Extreme, you know. Almost, but he didn't chuck a bottle into a tornado and it never hit the ground. He didn't do that though.
Hits the ground.
he didn't do that, so not quite extreme enough. But yes, this is the greatest movie ever made. I watched this movie when I was a kid. This was my family's movie we watched. I don't know why. I don't know why exactly, but I do know why, because it was great. And everybody involved recognized that reality, and we loved it. Also, I always wanted to see a tornado. Never had a chance so far.
I've seen a tornado.
It's weird because I live in a tornado-prone place. Always did during my childhood, but just never saw one. Never got to see one. I
haven't either.
I have.
My dad has seen many a tornado.
I've seen a tornado.
He lived in the same place that we did. Like, of course, we all lived in the same place. It's a tornado, freaking tornado alley is actually what they call it.
I've seen a tornado.
Hey, I wonder. So you haven't seen a tornado, right, Caleb? I haven't seen one. Has Steven seen one?
I've seen a tornado.
Tell us about your.
I'm pretty sure that nobody on this podcast has ever seen a tornado, Sam.
I've seen a tornado.
Tell us about the story. How was it, like the movie Twister?
No, nothing at all like the movie. I was a kid. I was very young, and there was a really bad tornado coming through Indy, and we lived on the near south side of town, and we had this really awesome closed-in porch when I was growing up in the house I grew up in, and there was a porch swing sitting outside, and I was freaked out. I was a kid, so I got up and wasn't able to sleep because the storm was so loud. Until I went out to find my dad, and he was sitting out on the porch swing outside. And I was freaking out. So I was like, Dad, I'm scared. He goes, come on out here. And he, had me sit down next to him on the porch swing. And he goes, I said, why are you out here? It's scary out here. He goes, the storm can't get me. He goes, I'm fine.
Well, that's naive.
Well, I trusted him. He was my father. I had no reason to doubt him. He said, the storm can't get me.
This storm won't hurt us. This storm won't hurt us.
He said it's far off. And it was, in fact.
As lava breaks through the house. As lava pours straight through the house right after saying that.
Right. We're safe.
I mean, tornado is what I meant to say. Tornado breaks through the house.
No. It's lava. You're right.
Takes your dad away from you. Incredibly precise tornado.
Right.
Jeez.
But we were sitting there watching the storm, and out on the distance we saw the funnel clouds start to form, and it was fairly far out in the distance on the other side of town, actually. But we were able to see it from where we were sitting. We saw the funnel clouds start to form. And he goes, all right, why don't you go back inside and go to bed? And I did.
Cool. What a great story.
Was it at nighttime or daytime?
I was in bed, so it was night.
And you could see the tornado at night?
The lightning, Sam. Lots of it.
Did he say, son, you know the thing I said about the tornado can't get me, or like the storm can't get me earlier? Well, now there's a tornado, and that might get me. So you should probably go back to bed.
No. Hey, here's the thing.
If it was going to be a problem, he would have pulled us all into the basement.
The storm can't get me, but it can get you, son. Now get away from me. That's what he failed. That's why he's saying bad.
You guys took one of my cherished memories of my father, and you tarnished it. How dare you?
Did we tarnish it? Really?
Yeah, you're horrible people, and you are.
Will you never be able to look back on that memory again?
I think your memories are
No, I
tarnished.
will. I'll just forget that I knew you guys. No.
Exactly. That's how that works.
That's fair. I mean, we've only known you for like 3-4 years? I don't know.
Yeah, it was probably like 5.
You've known your dad at least 20.
Yeah. So it's fine. It's fine. You'll forget us very easily.
How old do you think I am, Sam?
I don't know anymore.
I'm older than both of you.
Combined?
No.
Almost.
How old do you think I am, Sam?
Well, you're either in your early 20s or late 40s.
Neither.
Okay.
I'm in
well,
my
somewhere in that
mid-30s.
range.
I will be 34 in like...
Dang, you're older than my brother, and he's like way older than me. He's 31.
Can't be that much older than you.
Wow. Okay. Well, hey, you know, that was not supposed to happen, but it's cool. Not a big deal.
I will be turning 34 the week this episode airs.
Look, happy birthday for one.
Yeah, seriously. I'm
Also,
definitely gonna forget that one. So yeah, happy birthday ahead of time.
this Mountain Dew and whiskey is for you, Steven.
Thank you, and I will drink this.
I'm gonna drink.
Scotch
I'm gonna
myself.
This empty glass of ice cube is from.
So, on the topic of that scotch that you're now drinking, anybody else have thoughts about Twister? Because like I pretty much gushed for a little while about how I think. I mean, Sam, like you started to say something, and then I went off on a tangent about how much I love the movie.
Caleb went off on a tangent?
I love the movie.
Never happened.
You know, I'm not sure that I made it entirely clear that I freaking love this movie. I
Hold
think
on.
it's the best.
But okay, so that's how you feel about that. But how do you feel about this movie?
The only thing that I think could make this movie better is if they, instead of trying to just research about tornadoes, were trying to figure out a way to actually kill tornadoes. I feel like that's the next logical leap for this particular film is to, we discover their secrets, we discover their weakness, right? So that we can kill them, right? And then Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt would just like drive around killing tornadoes. That would be that would be what I would want.
It's like Twister 2.
This time it's personal.
This time it's personal. Okay. No,
I have a question though, real quick. Sorry, Sam, real quick. Is Rabbit good or wise?
What?
I was setting you up for another quote from the movie, but
I wasn't paying attention. Sorry.
Caleb didn't like the movie that much, Steven.
So you gotta understand.
Caleb, you ruined my awesome joke.
So you gotta understand. I don't know all the quotes, even though I've seen this movie a lot. Okay, so there's this thing that happened in my childhood. I watched this movie like probably 400 times, but we had this special DVD player that censored cuss words. And so like there's certain parts of this movie I don't remember because they were censored out by the cuss word filter.
I don't think there's any cuss words happening during this.
Maybe not, but I'm just using that as a blanket excuse for any of the I mean, it may not actually hold up to scrutiny, Steven, but I'm just saying this is my blanket excuse for why I wouldn't know a particular quote.
Bob's Road, man.
Okay, well, anyway, I'm gonna pass. I pass on the quote that you're making.
You're horrible, and I don't like you. Sam.
What a weird magical DVD player. How did it work?
I don't know. I've actually thought about that.
Combination of science and magic.
I've thought about like how they made that work because
maybe it had to be certain compliant disc.
It was called no. It was it worked with anything like new DVDs that were released after the existence of maybe. I think it was called TVG or something technology, but it was a particular like there were a whole line of DVD players that had TVG technology. So maybe it was compliant DVDs had the built-in filters in it, but yeah, it was it would filter out and just blank out the cuss words. So that's how we got to watch those movies because my parents were not big on the cuss words.
Yeah, my parents didn't care. They didn't give a fuck. Anyways, so Twister, like Caleb, for me, it's one of 3 childhood like Dumas family movies in which we gathered and watch every weekend. The other 2 being Independence Day and Jurassic Park. So
I wasn't allowed to watch
way more
Jurassic
about
Park
you than
or Independence Day.
So my family, we have a lot of sentimental love for these movies. No, I would gush about it with Twister. Watching it again, I have a couple of minor qualms that don't ruin the experience for me at all. I'm still in love with it, but there are certain things that are...
Okay, let's hear them.
Well,
hear them, Sam.
The special effects are a little dated. Just a tad. Some of the special effects. The tornado effects themselves, not so much, but there's some other things going on, like debris and like cutting to like a satellite, watching the planet Earth technology stuff.
Okay, that is bad. That satellite is bad. That's a really bad. But you know what? They pass it off as an excuse because they zoom out. It's acceptable. It's excusable because They zoom out from a computer monitor after that, implying that this is like a computer simulation of the satellite. Like it's thin. It's a very thin excuse for it, but it's pretty bad.
Because my question was always, how do they get the cameras out in space to film the satellites?
It's
Well,
not. I think it's
Steven.
supposed to be like a computer generated simulation of this satellite. But the question is, why would they have that?
That's true.
The answer is that they wouldn't.
Like I said, none of it ruins my experience. I still enjoy the movie just as much as I enjoy it. The Pepsi, the tornado creating the Pepsi logo on this monitor was kind of funny. There was
some Pepsi sponsorship happening in there.
There's definitely some Pepsi sponsorship.
And you know what? The ad integration, branding situation that happened with the Pepsi thing later on with the Pepsi cans, I think was elegantly implemented. When it comes to ad spots and stuff like that. I mean, they sliced up like 1 million Pepsi cans, all with the Pepsi logo conveniently visible. For it to make the little propeller blades.
I didn't think that
sensors, which
humanly possible.
I thought it was great. I mean, I can just imagine all the cuts on fingers. I mean, that would be a horrible situation to be in. Well, I wouldn't want to be them.
And that actually brings me to my third point, is the irony of having so much Pepsi sponsorship, considering the villains of the movie. They kept calling corporate sellouts.
Yeah. Okay. So yes,
he went and got him some corporate sponsors.
But I don't think that affects the merit of the film itself, because in universe, they're not sellouts. Okay, but this is business. Okay, you have to just accept the reality that there's going to be corporate sponsorship.
This brings me to another point, and this is one thing that's kind of irritating: is Carrie Elwes' character is portrayed as a villain, and at no point in the movie does he do anything villainous, nor is he even a villain. He's doing.
He's trying. He really does is exactly what everyone else has already done,
and he's trying to.
He takes credit for it.
He's doing. Yeah, well, he's doing it for money, but he's still trying to help people. They're still trying to do science.
He's stealing credit, though.
Because
Bill Paxton. But no, I understand, and I do feel like the death was a little extreme, but I think it had to do with his kind of arrogance and his desire, his desperation to break free of Bill Paxton's, because Bill Paxton is the extreme, for example.
Billy is the extreme.
Billy is the extreme, and the thing is that he lived, Carrie Elwes' character lived in the shadow of the extreme until he got his corporate sponsorship, but the extreme is still the extreme, and I really feel like that it's supposed to be kind of like a lesson in sometimes people are just better at stuff than you, and you should probably just let that be. Instead of getting corporate sponsorships and selling out and trying to steal credit. If you steal credit, you get killed by a tornado.
That makes sense.
That's the moral of the story.
That is in the Bible.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's probably in there somewhere.
There was one thing I've always questioned about my childhood and never really actually thought to question it consciously. And so I read the fun facts about it. Was at the movie theater when they're getting popcorn, how the TV starts to go staticky, and that tells them there's a tornado there. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand that until I looked into it. That tornadoes causes interference on channel 2 frequencies.
Oh wow, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So that's that's just some. Michael Crichton wrote it. I mean, that's why it's in there, because Michael effing Crichton wrote it.
Of course.
And I didn't realize
you know what?
that.
When Michael Crichton was writing the story, I suspect that he wasn't taking into account that there would be Pepsi sponsorship.
No.
So I think it's totally fair that the story was written.
The sponsorship doesn't go against it. It's just kind of funny. But also, Josh, do you know Joss Whedon touched up the script?
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
As in which would explain all the.
What a hero!
I was going to say there's a lot of good dialogue in this film.
Yeah, because if you ever read a Michael Crichton book,
which is more than I can say for other films on this list.
Shut up, Steven.
Okay, that's that actually makes perfect sense, because yes, there's really good dialogue in this movie, and
that's very Joss.
It's
Joss Whedon-esque.
It's so snappy and clever. Bantery and clever. Yeah, such good banter.
Yeah,
which is what Joss Whedon is best at.
So it spruces up the hardcore science fiction that Michael Crichton can bog some people down with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So-
just like Jeff Goldblum can spruce up the. No, Michael. You know what? Friggin' Ian Malcolm is the greatest character.
Yeah.
I love
So,
him. I love
also,
him. He's a
another-
hero.
So good that Crichton brought him back from the dead for a sequel.
Yeah, he definitely
What?
died. He definitely died at the end of Jurassic Park. I have read
The
that
novel.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've read that book. He was absolutely dead at the end of that book, and then
And
he
so
just
when
wasn't.
Spielberg talked,
then he
Crichton
just
into doing a
wasn't.
sequel.
Then he
Yeah.
just wasn't
So,
dead.
another
Same
fun
with,
fact.
the
Another-
Richard Attenborough character, Hammond, was also dead at the end of Jurassic Park.
He wasn't
yet-
alive in the.
Well,
second
he was
book.
dead in
The second
the
book.
Lost World book also.
Yeah.
Oh,
because
was he?
the
Okay.
the book
Oh.
The Lost World is not the same story
No.
at all as a movie.
They're way different. The book is way cooler.
No,
and they
Stephen,
actually-
don't. Okay, look, me and Sam, we know.
Here's the thing.
No, I wasn't.
half.
I was oh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
Um,
written simultaneously, just like 2001: A Space Odyssey,
Um,
and they went a little bit different directions,
way different directions.
substantially different directions.
The book is really effing cool. For me, another fun fact about me as a child, Michael Crichton was my favorite author. From like the age of 8 until like 13, I read all of his books. Probably should not have done that as a child. My brother had a stack of them, and I read them.
I would
And
I would ask
my
which
mom would
brother,
bu-
but I know the answer to that.
My
question.
mom would buy them, and she like if I didn't have one, she'd buy one. So I'm like 11 years old reading The Terminal Man. Which-
It was definitely Hans. It was Hans. It was definitely Hans. It couldn't possibly have been Joseph, who had books.
so
Couldn't possibly have been Joseph. Probably
Joseph
was
would
far.
never have books.
Joseph was far too busy throwing knives and snapping whips.
so probably one of the biggest influences on my entire life was all of his books at such a young age. Has
Wearing
made me
cowboy
so
hats.
cold and callous and objective in my view of things.
For our listeners at home who don't know Sam's family, Joseph, Sam's brother, is an author.
Right, and Hans snaps whips and throws knives and wears cowboy hats.
Right.
And he-
So-
And is also bald, but you wouldn't know that unless you were at Sam's wedding.
I was at Sam's wedding, or have seen pictures from Sam's wedding, which I'm sure are on his Facebook page somewhere.
Yeah, but
he was wearing the cowboy hat.
Yeah, he took
No,
it
he
off briefly.
He
Oh, that's right.
briefly took it off while we were sitting around a fire,
Oh, that's
and
funny.
it was I almost had a heart attack. I was like, "What?" No idea. He wears a cowboy hat all the time. You wouldn't know that there were no hair. You wouldn't know that there was no hair under there.
Because he's got so much facial hair.
Right.
It goes
Like
down
myself.
to well, I mean more so.
I just don't wear a cowboy hat.
I mean, that's what happened to me. I just started tugging on my chin hair, and all the hair on my head just kind of went.
I know
Same
that's how it
idea.
happens. People don't believe it, but it's how it happens.
No, absolutely. Caleb and I, as two bearded bald men, can absolutely attest to that.
Yep.
all
But
my hair's on top of my head still.
I feel like we
just
got.
need to tease this out a little more, Sam.
It's gonna stay there forever too. My
I feel
hair
like we
is-
got off. I feel like we're getting off the track of Twister.
Yeah, we need to
And
get back to Michael Crichton.
I would like to. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Michael
I
Crichton
just
and what?
want to talk about Michael Crichton.
I want to. I
He's
do
a cool
want.
guy.
I do want to talk about because I haven't said much about this movie other than
Oh, yeah,
how quotable
Steven.
it is. But I just want to, as I was watching the movie, I noticed that in a lot of the minor roles, even characters that don't have any speaking roles,
Mhm.
are all played by really awesome character actors. So I just made a list of all the really awesome character actors that I noticed in the film, and mostly they're on the teams, the two separate teams, both Jonas's and Joe's. But Joe's team has, of course, Philip Seymour Hoffman, the great Philip Seymour Hoffman, Alan Ruck, who was Cameron in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Sean Whalen, who would go on to play, among other roles, and he's kind of one of those, that guy. But he was Frogurt on Lost. Joey Slotnick, who I know from both Boston Public and Nip Tuck. Todd Field, who, while also being in Eyes Wide Shut and Stranger Than Fiction, is also an Academy Award winner writer and director for films like In the Bedroom and Little Children, which I found really interesting. Wendell Josepher was Haynes. She had a couple of small roles on EdTV, Intolerable Cruelty. Jeremy Davies, who is awesome. He was Daniel Faraday on Lost, Dickie Bennett on Justified. He was also in Saving Private Ryan. Really great actor. On Jonas's team, you've got Zach Greiner, recurring roles on Deadwood, The Good Wife. Patrick Fischler, who I know from Mad Men, you guys would probably know from Mulholland Drive. Abraham Ben Ruby, who's that giant guy who plays a giant in everything. He's just this big, huge, giant, hulking giant guy. Jake Busey, son of Gary Busey. He's actually, I learned that he's going to be in the new Predator movie coming up. but Jake Busey's kid's in this movie. Anthony Rapp from Rent and Dazed and Confused is in this movie. Eric LaRae Harvey from Luke Cage and Boardwalk Empire is in this movie. One of the Geico cavemen, Ben Weber, is in this movie. He was also in Kissing Jessica Stein. And,
Great
Nick
character,
Sadler.
great character actor. One of the greatest character actors.
Ben Weber.
Geico caveman. One of the greatest characters ever put to film.
Right. I'm glad we're in agreement. But no, I mean, that's just like the guys in the minor roles that I was able to kind of pick out. Just all the supporting and minor players, just these really great actors. So there's a deep, deep bench of great acting in this movie. And a lot of these guys, before they got their start, are here doing this movie, which is not something you see a lot.
What a star-studded cast! What a like after the fact star-studded cast.
Yeah, before they were star-studded cast.
Right.
I also just want to throw out here that this is one of, if not his very first, Bill Paxton's first starring role in a movie. Because before this, he had pretty much just been a James Cameron day player. Stuff like Terminator, Aliens, True Lies, and then
Predator 2.
Yeah, Predator 2, Tombstone, Apollo 13. And then this is really his first starring role beyond this point. And then from here, he would go on to do A Simple Plan, Frailty, and then on TV, both Big Love and Training Day, which he's wonderful in both.
Never forget Big Love. That's, that's the real starring role right there.
He's great in that show, man.
I've never watched it. Just the basic premise is just hilarious to me. So
it's a good show though, dude. He's very good on that show.
I love Bill Paxton. He's a true hero, and it pains me that he's gone now. Mm-hmm. It hurts, man. But Bill Paxton is like the guy who can deliver. Bill Paxton has a superpower. And that superpower is delivering lines that literally nobody else could get away with delivering. Somehow Bill Paxton says things that you're like, what the like nobody could say that but Bill Paxton. He just gets away with it. Yeah, he's got the best one.
And sometimes they're absolutely horrible lines. Like
they're horrible lines, but he pulls it off anyway.
Like literally everything he says in True Lies.
Yes.
If you've ever seen that movie.
Yes.
He's absolutely despicable in True Lies.
He is, but he
pulls it off really well.
He does. What a hero! What an American hero! He's a true American if I ever saw one.
Boy, howdy.
But yeah, good times.
I got another question, guys. Do we have to talk about Dante's Peak?
Mother,
I think we do.
I really would rather not. I took a page and a half of notes, and they're all just stuff I hated about this movie.
I would rather that we did talk about it because I want to see what Steven hates so much about it. Because honestly, I don't feel strongly any kind of hatred towards this movie.
Everything.
Okay.
Okay.
The special effects and cinematography, top notch.
How about Sam just make his entire case, and then Steven can refute that case, and then I can be the neutral, Switzerland over here, as I always
neutral.
am.
You're totally gonna side with Sam because you always do.
No, I don't.
No, in fact, most of the time he sides with you.
No, that's false.
Yeah. No, it's actually true though, because most of the time Steven makes like the logical, agreeable argument, and then Sam makes like the freaking savage like madman argument about how things that I don't understand. So yeah.
Well, just before you start, Sam, I really want to know the answer to one question. And this is a serious question. I'm not going to do my setup for a serious question then ask something ridiculous. But how many times did you watch this movie as a kid?
20.
Okay, that helps a lot. Go ahead, make your argument.
Steven, I got a question for you real quick, and I'm going to answer it for myself as well. How many times have you seen this movie?
Go ahead and answer it.
I've seen it just this one time, and I suspect you have as well.
You are not incorrect.
Okay. So the perspective we're coming from here is totally different than Sam's.
That's what I wanted to set up initially.
Okay, I chose the better Volcano movie.
I'm not going to tell you that Volcano was good because it wasn't.
I mean, LA, seriously?
Tell you it's better than this because I'm not sure that it was. Rotten Tomatoes would tell you it is. But I honestly just... I've got to hear why this movie. Go
Right.
please,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, Sam. Let's do
Okay,
it.
so despite its flaws, which are numerous, don't get me
Oh,
wrong.
so numerous, Sam.
Don't get me wrong.
Numerous.
I mean, it's Pierce Brosnan. First of all, Pierce Brosnan in a movie. That's your first mistake.
Yeah, we've never
But it was
seen
also
that.
the 90s. But it was also the 90s.
It
So
was
no
a
one
different
knew.
time.
Everyone thought Pierce Brosnan. And
Pierce
I asked,
Brosnan, who's going to be Cable in the next Deadpool movie.
no, Josh Brolin is.
Was it Josh Brolin?
I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure it's Josh
that's
Brolin.
that would be a totally different person. And also, I'm not sure about Pierce Brosnan as Cable.
Josh Brolin on the other hand is Cable.
Like,
I can
I'm
go
not
on.
sure about I'm not sure about many things when it comes to X-Men or comic books
Oh, you're
in
right.
general.
I
But
totally
man,
read that
Pierce
wrong.
Brosnan. Look, I know a little bit about Cable. He was in one of those Marvel vs. Capcom games, and man, that guy does not look like Pierce Brosnan.
I don't know that he looks like Josh Brolin either. He looks
They
like
got
Ron Perlman is who he looks like.
Josh
They
Brolin
got-
can be many things, I
That's
believe.
true. That's true. But we can discuss that in our weekly Josh Brolin podcast.
Okay, yeah.
Moving on. Dante.
Subscribe if you're not.
Rolling with Brolin, it's amazing. Every week we come on and just
Oh
talk
man, we
all
need to
things
do it.
Brolin.
We need
Now
to do
we
it
have
now.
to.
Yeah, we have to. Oh, you think we could get Josh Brolin on as a guest?
When we're
If we
famous.
can't, there's no reason to do it.
No, it's too great. We got to do it. All right, continue.
Just every week we watch one movie in his oeuvre and just talk about how much we love it.
And when we run out, we actually stalk him and start to roll with him, like become his posse.
Entourage?
Yeah.
Entourage.
Yeah,
I like it.
Rolling with Brolin. Okay,
we're
back
coming.
to me.
We're coming for you, Josh Brolin. Watch out.
You decent actor, you.
I've seen a movie or two that you've been in.
You're okay. I like you.
Didn't think much about it, to be honest.
You've had some good roles.
Doesn't he
Have you guys
voice
ever had
Thanos?
scotch come out your nose? Because it's not pleasant.
Doesn't he voice Thanos? He voices Thanos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, No Country for Old Men. Anyways,
Oh yeah.
True Grit.
True Grit. Yeah, he's in a lot of good stuff. Anyways, what was I doing?
Milk
Oh yes,
and Great Milk.
defending.
Goonies.
Defending. Hi, he's in a lot of good stuff. We get it, Steven. But
Yeah, we
he's
get
an
it.
okay actor.
We get it.
I like
We've
him.
got it. At
When I
this
see
point,
Josh-
we understand.
When I see Josh Brolin, I'm not like, oh, Josh Brolin. I'm like, hey, it's Josh Brolin. He might, or he might not do an okay job.
Jonah Hex.
Oh, we get it.
I worked at the theater when that came out. I didn't watch that movie.
We all did.
I didn't.
Did we all
Uh,
not watch that movie? 'Cause
I didn't,
no.
certainly didn't.
I didn't watch it. I
No,
didn't
so
watch it.
there you go.
We're gonna have to for Rolling with Brolin.
That's
Oh,
true.
Sicario,
W.
Old Boy, Gangster Squad. Yeah. Men in Black 3, though. Men in Black
Sicario.
3.
Sicario is the best movie I've in 2015.
Oh, you played
Probably.
George B. Bush and W?
Or wait,
Okay,
was
I guess.
was Sicario 2016?
Yeah. Planet
That's-
Terror. No,
it was
15,
probably the best.
15, 15.
15. Okay, yeah, it was definitely the best movie I saw in 15 though.
Planet Terror,
Because what even came out in 2015?
Mad Max.
Oh shit. Okay, Mad Max is no. Ooh,
I know,
man, that's
I-
a tough one because Sicario is freaking great.
I had the same problem. I had the same problem. As a diehard Mad Max obsessed fan, I have.
mean-
Controversial hot take for you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
I've still not seen Sicario.
Oh, what are you? What are you? What is wrong with you?
I'm a
Oh,
busy
Into the
man who
Blue?
pretty much only watches movies for this podcast.
Sicario is on my Plex server. You can watch it literally anytime.
I know it's also on Netflix, isn't it?
I think it's on Hulu.
Hollow
I mean,
Man.
I have both. So
Mimic.
Okay, we get it. Josh Brolin, a decent actor. Okay, Sam,
the
I
Valley
believe
of
you're the
Eli.
one. I believe you're the one who said that originally.
21 Jump Street, the TV series.
Okay, so about this, which movie? What movie are we talking about anymore?
did anyone say Goonies?
You said
did.
Goonies like 3
You said
times.
that movie.
Okay, because if no one said it yet, we really need to bring up Goonies.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we've gotten our schedule set for rolling, I think that it's
So we got to
important-
do them chronologically.
It's an
Definitely.
important time for you You know how I talk to you guys about this brings up another thought in my mind. You know how I talk to you guys about doing the idea that my sister and I had of doing a Just for Jeff month.
And how you didn't listen
we never
or
did
watch
that.
The Fly.
We didn't watch The Fly. That didn't happen. So as a result, Just for Jeff month didn't happen. But I think we should have a podcast in the same vein of Rolling with Brolin that we should do called Just for Jeff. And just do the podcast of
once we finish Rolling with Brolin, we do Just for Jeff.
Right, it's perfect.
So we have a podcast. We have a podcast where we just go through the oeuvre of one actor, no matter how good or bad their films.
And let's just keep doing it for every actor until we run out of actors.
There's nothing wrong with this idea.
So Sam, Dante's Peak. What do you love?
Dante's Peak. The special effects. The special effects and the cinematography.
I don't know, man. That lava looked pretty CG'd to me.
It was really? Did you watch it?
It looked pretty CG'd to me.
Boy, howdy, did I watch this movie.
Man, I saw some lava, and it looked CG. Well, there were some that looked pretty good, but then there were some that looked pretty CG. Like whenever it started busting through the house and whenever the cars were melting in the lava at the house, and pretty much everything that happened at the house looked pretty dang CG to me. Now, with that being said, I didn't necessarily expect them to bust out some real lava on set. I wasn't expecting real lava on set necessarily, but I felt as though it wasn't the most well composited effects that I've ever seen at the time.
Well, actually,
but I mean, at the time it was probably pretty good. But
I was reading I was actually on a forum that discussed the special effects of that movie, and they say that's the only bad spot of the special effects was the cabin scene when the lava busts through.
And that really is the main.
Yeah, because it's not actually all CG. The fire and stuff that came through was actually real. It's just the composite and stuff wasn't done very well. It was there's stuff that frame rates are off and it wasn't put together very well.
It just doesn't. Yeah, it wasn't very well composited together. But most of the other effects were pretty great. I mean, don't really take issue with that. I think that you're on point there with.
But and it's not even just the effects. It's like the entire atmosphere of the movie. Like the cinematography really played into it. They just did such a great job of creating a volcano movie. And the cool thing with volcanoes to me versus like Twisters, with Twisters it's a twister. With Towering Inferno it's fire. With volcanoes there's earthquakes, hail, ash, acidic water, lava. You get the whole shebang.
There was a good variety of threats.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just stuff falling on you.
Exactly.
Just out of nowhere.
Explosions, ash. It was all really well
little
done. Meteorites
are falling all over the place.
So for me, and I'm not going to argue the story because there are plot points, like watching now, that I'm just like smacking my head at. Like the fucking kids going up to get grandma, who's an idiot, and then the movie actually kind of falls apart in the last 15, 20 minutes, honestly, when they go into the mines after that.
Yeah, it really kind of just rushes to a conclusion because, man, like it's weird. It's like the actual volcano eruption part of it is like wrapped up in such a short period of time that it feels like almost anticlimactic because it didn't really.
It was kind of, and everyone was so happy that they got Pierce Brosnan's character out of there. Like everyone was cheering, like the whole people were there to rescue him, and I'm like, isn't the volcano still erupting at this point, people? Should we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, well, they said the emergency signal had been going off for several days, so maybe the volcano did most of its damage already by the time they got there.
I didn't catch that.
So they were probably. I assumed they were trapped in the mine for like several days before emergency rescue got there.
I didn't catch that.
When they got them and like whenever they got Pierce Brosnan and the family out of the mine, they were all like in good health and good spirits. And I'm like, dude, if you were trapped in a mine for 3 days, you would not be feeling super great.
No, but it's also the 90s. And
Pierce Brosnan also was trapped inside of a tightly enclosed space with a broken arm with bone sticking out of his arm for 3 days, and that's gonna have infection, and there are gonna be ramifications to that. But he's just kind of
psychological ones too.
He's just sitting there. He's like, "Yeah, we'll go fishing. We're definitely gonna go fishing."
But it's also Pierce Brosnan. I mean, is anything effective for Pierce Brosnan? Everything's a happy, hunky-dory day for that guy.
I'll tell you what affects Pierce Brosnan. This is the one thing I learned about volcanoes while watching this movie. If I'm in a volcano, okay, and Pierce Brosnan is there, he is not driving the car because, man, that dude makes bad decisions behind the wheel.
My favorite is he shows up to the town with the most perfectly equipped vehicle for dealing with all that stuff. It's like,
For
good thing
real.
Good thing you had that snorkeler attached to your engine already. Just
I know,
there.
right?
Like, were you
Yeah.
expecting to be driving through the water? Wasn't it just like a routine checkup? What's going on there, Mr. Pierce Brosnan?
Oh, I don't drive. Whenever I'm hunting volcanoes, I don't drive anything that doesn't have a snorkel. Just in case I have to drive through some lava.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's got some flaws, but for me, it is still a fun action adventure movie. I'm not going to say, hey, this should have been nominated for an Oscar for anything besides special effects, which were just spot
That's good
on.
because it wasn't nominated for an Oscar for anything.
Okay, Steven. I feel like it was still better than Towering Inferno because this was exciting. Fun stuff happened.
Do you know?
Yeah, but Towering Inferno
actually was nominated for an Oscar,
nominated
Sam?
for an Oscar.
Yeah, but Towering Inferno.
Towering Inferno and Twister were both nominated for Oscars.
Times were different back when Towering Inferno happened, though.
Yeah.
I mean, Twister is 96, Dante's Peak is 97, so they're the same time period. So standards are the same.
And I get
And
Twister.
Twister was nominated. Dante's Peak was not. So I think Steven's point stands, but not as it applies
even
to
made
Towering
my
Inferno.
point.
Well, I
Well,
think the
feel like-
direction
feel
you
like-
were going.
I feel like we all made your point. I can't imagine. I'm trying to like cover all the things because I can't imagine you having anything else to say.
Here's what I'm
I feel
saying.
like I cover everything. I get it. Bad acting because Linda Hamilton. Really, we don't really need Linda Hamilton.
Oh no, she has got the best single character moment in this film.
Which one's that?
Very end of the film, it's like her second to last character moment. When she's in the mine with the kids and she's trying to put a brave face on. And I don't remember what she says, but you could tell she's really like trying to keep it together for her kids.
The daughter says, "My head hurts," and she says, "Mine does too."
I don't even know if that may have been the moment. I don't know if that was it, but
That's like the last
just-
moment that you see her in
There's
before Pierce
this-
Brosnan goes and gets trapped by rocks.
would that he could have stayed there.
It's fine. It's
but-
fine.
It's a fun
Compared to
movie.
everything else in this film where there is no character from anybody, I mean that's
Okay.
It's
a
Pierce
standout.
Brosnan. What'd you expect?
Okay, so here's one thing I
And there are
wanna talk
plot
about.
points. There are plot points that were rushed. Like first that guy was like, "Don't need to evacuate the town. There's no volcano." Then 2 scenes later, he's like, "We need to evacuate the town." Then he tells Pierce Brosnan it was his fault.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know. It's they act like this was a much more protracted thing that happened, but really it was like maybe like 12 hours later they're like, "Oh shit, we do need to evacuate. Okay, let's evacuate the town." It's like,
and then they killed him
okay.
off. Then they killed him off, but he wasn't like a bad guy. It was.
and they killed him off with the most. Okay, yeah, so he was like at the beginning he's like, "Oh come on, we don't want to disrupt their corporate interests because blah blah blah, and this has happened to me. I've been burned before. I want to protect the corporate interests, whatever." But he's really not being a bad dude. He just wants to make sure this town does not like die because they overreacted to a false alarm. He really is actually a level-headed character here. The only reason that we side with Pierce Brosnan is because we are meant to side with Pierce Brosnan. That's supposed to be. That's the job of the script, is to make us side with him. The other guy is not
Maybe the
like,
only thing the script actually does effectively.
he's and the thing is, like, the other guy is not a bad guy. He's just a guy who's being reasonable and level-headed.
Mm-hmm.
And like they end up just killing him off like that's justified somehow.
Now, unfortunately,
which is fine, but they use but this is an issue. This is a major issue out of this movie. It has the most inappropriate use of the Wilhelm scream I've ever heard in my entire life.
Thank you.
Because this guy is not a bad guy. He's not just like some random character. He's not some random goon who's getting thrown off a cliff. He's a decent guy that you can connect with as a human being, and they Wilhelm scream his death. What
And
the
they
fuck?
wanted to have emotional resonance too. You can tell by the way that literally
Yes!
everyone reacts.
The way everyone reacts.
The Wilhelm scream is not the sound effect you put in if you want
It
to
is-
try to give someone's death emotional resonance.
It is
You
so
don't
inappropriate. It is the most inappropriate thing I've ever seen put to film. It blows my mind that happened.
And Caleb is a John Waters fan, so
I don't know what a John Waters is.
no, Sam and I get that joke. Any cinephiles listening to this podcast will get that joke.
fantastic. I hope someday Caleb is a John Waters fan. Just because
So he can get that joke.
just says fuck the world.
just Caleb, I will tell you there are much more disturbing things that can be put to film.
Okay,
Like John Waters.
Like
I
anything John
didn't
Waters
say
has
disturbing.
ever
I didn't say disturbing. I just said it was inappropriate.
Like John Waters.
Inappropriate.
There are much more inappropriate things that have been put to film.
Like everything he's ever done in his life.
Like anything John Waters has ever made.
Okay, well, I'm saying it is the most inappropriate use of the Wilhelm scream that I know of.
Okay. I'm going to rebut
fair.
Sam's entire argument using Aristotle.
Okay.
So you guys
Oh,
know
let's do it.
What was my argument?
That it was the
That
plot
it's a
was
good
bad,
film.
but the special effects were awesome.
Okay.
I'm going to dismantle the whole thing and tell you why this movie really
What's
should not be
Aristotle
seen by
got?
anyone ever. Because I will say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the worst film we have ever watched for this podcast.
Did you see There Will Be Blood?
Yes, and it's an amazing film.
Yeah, that's
Also,
a good.
thank God
That was the
Finch
wrong one to
retiring.
pick. That was the wrong one to pick, Sam.
Was it?
I mean,
Because
you
the
could
movie
literally
sucked
pick any other
ass.
film.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
have
a
you
good. That's a
watched-
good movie.
Movie sucked ass.
Sam, have you listened to the podcast where we talked about that movie?
Yeah.
You had a fairly decent review of it. You had a few
Yeah.
issues, but
I
you had
just-
a fairly
You're just
positive
lashing out
overall.
in anger.
I just
Okay,
don't
so
like
you
Daniel
guys know,
Day-Lewis.
if you didn't know, I was a philosophy major in college with a theater minor.
Oh yes, And then Aristotle was there.
And so Aristotle fits into both theater
How
and
old are you?
philosophy.
Right, of course.
Aristotle lays out the 6 elements of a well-told story, as it's put to, particularly in his case, stage, but these apply to film as well. The first and most important aspect is plot. The second is character. The third is theme. The fourth is language, how words are used. Rhythm is 5. The pacing. And then finally, 6th, if you have time after getting everything else just right, is spectacle. Which means that if you're putting more effort into your special effects than you are into your plot, you have effectively done everything in reverse, and you have made a bad movie.
A summer blockbuster.
Have you seen any Hollywood movies ever, Steven?
Yes, I have, and I don't think many of them are very good.
Okay.
Well,
I'm
I
just
side with
saying.
Steven on that one for sure. I don't think very many movies are good. That's why I hate movies.
Yeah.
You just got to know where to find the good ones, Caleb. You just got to know where to find the good ones. Start with Orson Welles and work your way out.
No, I wouldn't do that, but I start with Hitchcock on my way out.
I'm going to take that Hitchcock class, though. so online.
Contentious debate here on
So,
the rule of thirds.
maybe I'll have some better stuff to say next month when we actually watch a Hitchcock film.
Wherein Steven says I don't like Hitchcock, and Sam says Hitchcock made some good movies, and then I say Hitchcock made. I saw a couple of those movies. Rear Window's good.
Funny thing is, I agree with Steven on Hitchcock on most of the points.
Right.
I think,
so
I
there's
think
really
he's fairly
not a
overrated.
debate.
He's made some good films, and I won't deny that, but I think he's fairly overrated as a
Certainly.
director. I don't think he's
Okay.
as influential as everyone seems to think he is.
Now, what if you
So-
made Dante speak?
So Aristotle.
It would be a better movie than it is.
Well, did you know he did actually make a disaster film?
Which one?
The Birds. It's considered a disaster film. I know. I don't know why you think.
What
that
an
things are a
implausible
disaster
disaster.
film. It is considered a disaster film.
No, this podcast is considered.
I can agree with. I mean, I can definitely get down with that line of thinking. But man, what an implausible disaster.
Oh yeah, certainly.
I'm much
so
more on board with Independence Day as a disaster film than The Birds.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did anyone else laugh when the grandma jumped in the water?
I wouldn't say I laughed.
Because
I would say that was shockingly brutal and kind of that I hated that character. The character was kind of pointless.
No, you're absolutely right, and so her death has absolutely no
But
emotional
she
resonance
sacrificed herself.
whatsoever. In the most ridiculous and
Pause.
needless way possible.
Right. Her jumping into the water and pushing the boat got it the 2 feet it needed to get to the dock. That it was already
Surprised they
drifting
didn't
towards.
just start throwing kids at the dock, but that's me.
Well,
As soon as
no.
they got
She
on the
needed
dock,
to-
it collapsed.
No, she needed to push them the 2 feet they needed to get to the dock that they were already drifting towards. She needed to, because otherwise the boat would have sank at least 5 minutes after they got off of it.
But, and here's my point, if they had not gone up the mountain for her to begin with, if her character had not been a part of the film,
She'd have literally died already, and it wouldn't have mattered anyway.
and they would not have been put in harm's way.
Right.
So by
Indeed.
jumping in the water, she literally negates the entire reason for them going up the mountain and putting themselves in that much danger.
But isn't that usually the case with these types of films where they go and people end up going on these long, complex journeys to try to do something, and then it ends up not working out anyway because it's
this is a basic trope. This is a basic trope.
I get what you're saying, Stephen, but I also don't think it counts as a criticism because this happens in friggin' everything. Like Towering Inferno has its own moments like
I'm supposed to believe that the dog makes it through the burning forest, okay?
Well, why not? He's a dog. Like dogs are they run.
Actually, a fun fact, it's part wolf.
Dogs run. Wolf. They run. They jump. They bark. They do tricks. They might be able to survive a lava forest. I mean,
I'm just saying, when she jumped in the water, I thought it was completely ridiculous, and
what I think would have been more plausible, even more fun, is if the old lady wasn't there, but the kids went after the dog. So there's a whole adventure of a family trying to rescue a dog from a volcano.
Well, see,
but then the dog jumps
never
into
killed
the
dog
water
off in a Hollywood movie. Everyone knows that.
Then the dog jumps into the water. The dog jumps.
Maybe
see
what happens when you do kill the dog off.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit of a different story.
No, it's not. Dog dies, kill everyone.
John Wick and Old Yeller are the two films where a dog dies on screen.
Hey Sam,
it causes an emotional train wreck.
Is John Wick a disaster film?
I would say that a lot of people. No, it's a successful film.
Why not? Why not, Sam?
No, I'm just kidding, Sam.
Seems you have a pretty broad definition of disaster film.
Because it's a broad genre. It falls under science fiction, which is the broadest of all genres.
But by that token, literally anything could be science fiction.
Yes.
Podcast could be science
fiction.
But
disaster is a superset of science fiction, so it is. It's whatever. Or
but
subset,
science fiction,
rather.
literally anything can be science fiction. I've seen it argued where Lord of the Rings is science fiction. And it's actually argued by these people who study these genres and go to Harvard and shit. Science fiction is
all you need. You don't need a logical argument. You just need to go to Harvard and shit.
No, it makes sense.
Sam, why have you not gone to Harvard?
Because Harvard is not my choice of Ivy League school.
So
you're a Cornell man, aren't you?
Go Cornell.
Okay, so I've got something to say about Dante's
I half thought you were going to say Brown.
I got something to say about Dante's Peak.
I don't get these jokes we're making.
Yes,
neither do I, Sam. But I've got something to say about Dante's Peak. This also ties into Towering Inferno a little bit, and the disaster / horror / science fiction genre movies / Hollywood / all movies ever made, kind of combined together. This falls into every movie that was ever made genre, which is, as we all know, is a disaster film. The only genre that exists. So, dude, what is the deal with Hollywood and their strange, weird, prudishness and punishment of sexually active adults? Every sexually active adult in any of these movies gets horribly killed. And
That's
but what is the deal with it though? Because it's like punishment for just being a normal human being.
It's a horror trope because it gave, back in the days when this became a trope, it gave them excuses to see some titties.
Yeah. Okay, but it's become like a crusade against being a consenting sex having adult.
It has.
And I take issue with it.
Yeah.
What kind of puritanical, regime do we live under?
Those Christian filmmakers who made Friday the 13th and Halloween.
It's messed up.
God-fearing man has made Friday the 13th and Halloween parts 1 through
I'd like
6.
to see a movie where some adults have a consenting sexual relationship, have an enjoyable time with it, and then don't get brutally murdered.
There's a couple out there.
That'd be nice if that happened once in a while in Hollywood.
Yeah, what movie? There's a movie. There's movies. There are definitely genre bending movies, but they're far and few. But yes, it's just become a trope based off of some innocent. I mean, there's some guys wanted to see some titties. Just gave them an excuse.
But they didn't even show them in this movie. There were no titties in this movie.
Caleb takes umbrage with that.
They just imply. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do actually, because what is the point of the trope if you're not even going to actually execute the trope itself? I understand that the trope came from that. I already knew that. But whenever I look at this movie is a perfect example of the trope being carried through. It's like it's so ingrained as a thing that now it has lost its original purpose, and now it's just punishing people for having active sex lives.
But this is also the 90s in which they had all these where people like weren't self-aware. These movies weren't self-aware yet. So it was still like, oh, this is a classic trope. We'll throw this in here because we take ourselves seriously when we write these shitty movies.
Self-awareness wasn't invented until the advent of the new millennium. So
yeah. So it was still within that context of they thought they were making something.
Then everything became way too self-aware, and now everything's super meta.
Thanks to Grindhouse, everything became super aware, and now we need to bring it back to reality, guys. We gotta reel it back into bring back.
Can we please bring it back to reality, but within the framework of science fiction? Please.
Can we please have the fourth wall back? We would like the fourth wall back.
One more thing I need to say about Dante's Peak. And it's on the subject of Linda Hamilton, who I do agree still has the best character moment in the entire film. But and I understand she's an actress and she doesn't want to get, stuck in a type or in a certain type of role. But first of all, this script does not do her any favors. This is probably the worst script I've ever seen set to film. And I'm a guy who loves to watch superhero movies.
And he's not seen very many movies.
Do what?
And he's a guy.
No, I've not seen very many bad movies. I try to avoid them when I can.
How would you know until you saw them?
You can tell by the trailers most times.
Okay, Steven. Okay, I'll accept your premise.
But continue. I'm so used to seeing Linda Hamilton in the Sarah Connor role from Terminator, and specifically Terminator 2, which is the best of the franchise, as Caleb and I discussed earlier, which if Sam edits that out, you may or may not hear.
Just know that we discussed that.
We did discuss it, and it was a very important conversation that benefited all who heard it. And if you don't hear it, then I'm sad for you. But it's probably better because it really has nothing to do with this entire podcast. At any rate, I'm so used to seeing her in the Sarah Connor role that it's really hard for me to see her kind of playing this, put upon desperate individual pining for, of all people, Remington Bloody Steel. And I wanted to see her so badly through the movie to kind of play on Caleb's tornado killing tangent from earlier. I wanted to see her tie a bandana around her head, throw on a pair of aviators, say something halfway witty, and just pull out a bazooka out of nowhere and just blow that volcano to kingdom come. And sadly, we did not see that. And that is that is a movie that I could have gotten behind. Sarah Connor versus the volcano. That is a movie. Why didn't we watch Joe versus the volcano? I think that would have been a better movie than Dante's Peak. Maybe not a disaster movie, but this is a disaster movie that's also a disaster, and that's just too metatextual for me.
This is also a disaster movie that's also a movie. And
Caleb,
that's pretty metrosexual to me.
I don't think Caleb understands. Okay.
I don't think Caleb understands language and how it works.
Does it get any more metrosexual than that?
No.
Okay, so I want to say something about Dante's Peak. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I actually had a good time with Dante's Peak. I thought it was really poorly written, but I thought the effects were good, and I thought overall it was an enjoyable experience, even if it was not like good in the traditional sense.
In any sense.
I had fun with it. I enjoyed the time that I spent with Dante's Peak. I don't want that time back. I'm not like desperate to have a refund on that one. But I will say that whenever you look, let's just look at the script of this movie for a second, okay? The beginning of the movie, there's like a 5 minutes or so about Pierce Brosnan fighting another volcano in where was it? Some South American country, I can't remember. Colombia, where I get my coffee. So they're fighting a volcano there, right? They're just fighting it, and then his girlfriend dies, right? And why did we need to see that, or did that matter? Because it really didn't seem to have any effect whatsoever on his character, except for he was doing push-ups real hard that one time. But then after he got done doing push-ups real hard, he came in and was just Pierce Brosnan, and seemed completely like unemotionally affected. And the only thing I can think of that had any relevance to the plot whatsoever is the fact that other people doubted his judgment because they thought maybe he was being emotional. But it turns out he wasn't being emotional at all, and he was acting on his instinct, and that had absolutely no relevance to the plot whatsoever, and basically was not important at all.
Well,
Just a completely unimportant thing that definitely
character. You're never going to be wrong. So even if it, I mean, of course he's going to be right about everything.
But from the perspective of writing a story, what was the point of even having that aspect of the plot? Because it had absolutely no effect on anything that happened in the rest of the movie, except for in a very, very like basically it could have easily been written off as just not even existing.
I agree with you. One thing I noticed is that we see this whole story play out, and then he literally recaps it about a half an hour into the movie. Mm-hmm. We don't need both.
Right.
It's overkill to include both. And it's really like, just poor writing to include
probably both. The way it probably should have been is that there was no original, like we didn't ever see the original version of it. He probably should have just recapped that, and it would have just been a story that he told.
Or you cut in, as he's telling the story, you cut in that earlier footage so you can see how it all plays out as he with his voiceover narration playing over it.
And that could give us a little bit of
really well.
That could give us a little bit of insight into his character and where he's coming from, but not have been like what appeared to be like a major plot point, like a major setup, but what ended up not having really anything relevant to the plot of the movie at all.
And I think Twister ends up doing this much more effectively. And I mean, I have my doubts as to how effectively Joe's Ahab complex is woven throughout the film. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not the strongest.
It's not the strongest, but it is much better. It serves some purpose,
right? Versus what we see here, which is just like, okay, and right, because that lost. I mean, basically, it tells you that he's still grieving. He's in some way hasn't recovered. Just like Linda Hamilton hasn't quite recovered from her ex. So it gives them a reason to be together because neither one of them is attached. And so they can get together and you can feel good about it at the end.
That's such a unnecessary connection to make between them because they have all the reasons that they need to become attached to one another anyway.
Right.
Naturally, along the course of the plot of what's happening then and there, they have all the reasons they need to become attached to one another. You don't need a backstory for them. Like you don't need that. And it just really felt unnecessary. Whereas, in Twister, like much more effective. Even if you argue how effective it was overall as a plot point, it's far more effective than what we saw in Dante's Peak. The Ahab complex, and then also just like the interpersonal relationship things that are happening there between Joe and Billy. Are effective throughout the film, and together like Billy grows in this process and learns to like commit to something, and they save their marriage presumably, and it's pretty cool. Like the whole thing works out. She gets to catch slay / whatever her white whale, which usually doesn't happen, and he learns how to commit, and it's pretty cool. Whereas Dante's Peak like accomplishes absolutely nothing in terms of character development. There's just a volcano somewhere, which is pretty cool. I like volcanoes. Volcanoes are cool.
I'm just going to throw this out here for you guys. The Rotten Tomatoes, the highest scoring movie of the three of these is The Towering Inferno, which comes in at 71%.
Well, that's garbage.
Twister is second with 57%.
Yeah, those are garbage stats.
And Dante's Peak comes in third with, I want to say, I will pull it up here first before I give you a...
Twister has 57%. Those are absolute garbage stats. I don't accept them. I will not receive that.
Yeah.
That's fine. I mean, you don't have to receive the facts to change the fact of the facts. And Dante's Peak comes in third at 27%.
Well, as we all know, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with the Dante's Peak number, but I'm just saying, as we all know, aggregate scores are completely bullshit and they don't matter.
Well, but here's the thing, Caleb, and I think that a lot of this, because as you said, this is a film that you watched a lot when you were a child, and Sam watched Dante's Peak a lot as a child, along with Twister. but I think that your memories of the film and what it meant to you as a child, your sense of nostalgia, colors how you see the film now. And this is a human thing. This is why reboots are all the rage these days. Because I want the thing that I had when I was a kid.
If they rebooted, if they reboot Twister, I'll kill somebody.
I want to point out, though,
it's impossible. You can't do it.
If you go back and listen to this podcast, I have yet to describe Dante's Peak through rose-colored lenses. Like, well, it's not. I haven't I'm not stuck in this nostalgia thing because I specifically called out the things that are wrong with it and explained to you why.
But you also said that you were doing that to try to get ahead of me.
Yeah, but I still recognize the things are wrong with it.
But I'm still going to crap all over this movie.
I still recognize the things are wrong with it, but I still actually enjoy it because it's still actually a fun romp of a movie.
I think that it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not bad. Okay.
Volcanoes in LA are bad.
I had a decent time.
Hey, the coast is toast.
But the thing is, like, I think that Twister, even though I definitely have a nostalgia for it, I think Twister holds up in a way that Dante's Peak doesn't hold up as a movie. And Dante's Peak has too many actual, like, real issues with its plot and with its lack of character development at all, and its poor writing. Those issues are real, and I don't think that those issues are significantly present in Twister. Twister's just a solid good time. And Towering Inferno is boring. Really boring.
Yeah, I don't understand that rating they got. That doesn't even make sense because it's not even like particularly well acted. The characters aren't even that interesting.
I mean, I'm not sure that I would.
And Fred Astaire doesn't dance.
I'm sure I would say that.
That is baloney because he actually absolutely does dance. He doesn't do a big dance number.
Well, that's
he is absolutely dancing.
There's dancing that happens.
Not enough.
He and Jennifer Jones take a spin around that floor. You better believe that's true.
They do. I saw it happen.
In fact, I was looking for it, so when I saw it, I went, "Oh, yeah."
You've
been thoroughly refuted, Sam.
Well, I also want to send you guys a clip here because I'm going back to watching the cabin lava scene from Dante's Peak and how atrocious you thought it was. And the lava special effect themselves is not the atrocious part; it's the fire composite that's put around it, because it looks bad.
Okay, well, I just know
I am going to post this on the website, thirdsrule.wordpress.com, when this episode drops. So after you listen to this episode, head back to the webpage, and I'll include a link of this scene. And we'll put a poll up on Facebook and Twitter. Do you think these effects hold up? Yes or no? And we'll read the results of that on our next episode.
Because the fire is terrible, but actual lava that flows in, that's pretty good looking.
But what's funny is that earlier you were arguing that the fire looked great because the fire was real fire, and so that looked great.
I didn't.
That's literally what you said.
I specifically said that the composite of it.
Sam,
you specifically said that the fire effects look great because they were real and they actually happened there, but that the lava didn't look so great.
Go back.
When you edit this back, Sam, I want you to take what you said there and I want you to replay it right here.
Right. Yeah.
After I said the word here. And that way we can see both.
Right, because I know what he said because I was there.
I saw it happen. And I explained to you why I explained to you how I was on the forum, how they were talking about it's the one bad scene because the fire composite is terrible. Like the frame rate is off. And it looks bad.
No, that's not the issue. The frame rate is not an issue. I mean, the frame rate.
It's not 24 frames per second. That's why it looks bad. Well, the fire is real, but it's not
the only thing that looks bad. I mean, the whole all the compositing looks bad. It's not just frame rate mismatch issues. It's just that in general, the compositing just doesn't look good. It looks layered. Yeah. It looks like visibly layered together.
I know, but I'm arguing for the actual lava that comes in. I'm not arguing. That's what I'm saying.
That's fine. I didn't think the lava that came in looked very good either. I thought it all looked like garbage. Okay, to be honest, that whole cabin scene just looks like garbage to me. Everything else looks good. I really don't have any problem with anything else in this movie except, visual effects wise, because I got problems with all kinds of other parts of the movie. But specifically, Pierce Brosnan's driving. I really have problems with that. But
I will never get into a car that Pierce Brosnan is driving.
Why would you want to drive? Why would you even try it? Like, it's not. You're not gonna get. You can't drive through lava. That's not a thing that you can do. You can't do that.
And he definitely messed up the rims on that truck.
But the tires don't. The tires do not melt.
They do
The
actually.
gas tank does not erupt.
No, Steven, I'm sorry, you're mistaken there. The tires absolutely do melt. Whenever
Oh,
we
do
see
they?
the car, immediately after that scene, there's like no tire. It's just like torn up tire flaps just flapping around.
Yeah.
I was looking for that because I was watching this happen and I was like, those tires do not survive this. That just doesn't happen, you know? And then I got to the next scene and lo and behold, it didn't happen. And I was like, okay, this is fine. I mean,
Still,
it's not fine because
combustion of gas tank is an issue.
Well,
it'd have been a lot worse than
was it a diesel? Was it a diesel truck?
I don't know. He never at any point puts gas in the car.
Because diesel doesn't actually combust. It's very, very hard to get diesel to light on fire. Very, very hard.
I think magma might do it.
Diesel engines actually don't even have spark plugs. They ignite based solely on extreme compression. So yeah, there might be some credence to Sam's argument, but another issue that you're going to run into though with gas tanks in general, diesel or otherwise, is that they are usually made out of plastic, even in this time period, and the magma is gonna you're gonna have no gas at the very least. You're not gonna have any gas.
Yeah. So I just want to say this car, I had to suspend my belief more for this car than I did for the Bluesmobile in the Blues Brothers, which does far more fantastical things. And it has everything to do with how the movie sets it up, because the movie sets this up to be a very straightforward movie. If they'd set it up to be kind of a schlocky comedy, then yeah, I believe the car can do all these things. But since it's supposed to be taken very seriously, I'm just...
Well, I believe that the car could have been equipped with a snorkel. I mean, that's not crazy. That's not insanity. Like, that happens. But
I read that was realistic. That's
the
what
lava
adventures.
That's the lava driving adventures were a bit.
That's why I was joking earlier too. How he came with a vehicle so well equipped for Volcano, because all the spotlights. Like, he was very prepared for this with this vehicle.
I don't know. The U.S. Geological Service might have the kind of vehicles you need.
Yeah.
They might be well equipped for this sort of thing.
I just don't know. I figured he might roll in on something a little more gas efficient if he's driving up there.
You know, they really should have just rolled in with the National Guard to start with, and then everything would have been fine, and we wouldn't have had a movie to watch.
Yeah.
If only.
Speaking of helicopters, Towering Inferno, why'd that helicopter just like explode? It just kind of exploded. Yeah, I get that, but
it's called a backdraft, Caleb.
No, I get that part. I don't get the part where the helicopter just immediately just explodes the moment it touches the building.
It was the 70s and it's Hollywood.
It's a Hollywood action movie from the 1970s. You do the math. I mean, we don't question why everything explodes in a Michael Bay movie, do we?
No, we just know Michael Bay, so like things explode.
Right, I suppose. Okay, I guess I can give it that. I just felt that it was pretty odd that just the moment that the helicopter kisses the edge of the building, it explodes. I'm like, is the whole thing made out of gas? Is it all gas and like matches?
Hey, that helicopter crash in Dante's Peak was pretty cool, though.
It was.
I love how it bounced.
Yeah.
It was.
That was actually like cool.
That was a good time.
Yeah.
I had a great time with that. Because I was really thinking that helicopter was just going to crash, and you know the moment it touched the ground, it was going to explode, and then it was going to kill them. But that's because I watched Towering Inferno.
No, they would just drive through it like they did the tanker truck in Twister. That's what I thought was going to happen.
Well, yeah,
and
that's
I
a little ridiculous.
Of that than I did with it bouncing.
Going back to Twister, actually, when they drove through the house, I had to suspend my disbelief pretty far for that one.
No, that could happen.
They should have been killed like instantly.
Hold on a second. They were in a 4-wheel drive Dodge Ram pickup 1500.
Yeah, but when they get out of the truck, they're running past, and they would have been shish kebab by those fence posts.
They just pin cushions. They got lucky. They got lucky. It's all.
Cushions. I'm just saying, pin cushions.
Look, luck was a major factor in Twister. Okay, they got really lucky.
If you're gonna start poking holes, man, I can poke holes.
Well, you don't need to poke holes in Twister because it's objectively the best movie we watched. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that.
I don't think that's true.
For this podcast, or just in general?
Just the best one for this episode? Yeah, we watched. Okay. This is the best one this episode, for sure.
Agree with that. Because Towering Inferno is not that great. It's so boring. No, it's not.
Dante's Peak was, and I'll give you this, Sam.
You guys didn't like Chimes at Midnight either. Generally, so you're my opinion of how.
Are you comparing Towering Inferno to Shakespeare and Orson Welles?
I am. In this, really? When it comes to your taste in movies, yes, I am.
Okay, it looks like that I'm going to be the only one with a reasonable word to say in this podcast based on what I've just heard. This Shakespeare Towering Inferno thing. It's ridiculous. So what I'm going to say, as your voice of reason here, dear listeners, is that I think that Dante's Peak had some great spectacle, incredibly poor writing, just unbelievable, amazingly poor writing. I mean,
laughably atrocious writing.
I mean, man, okay. But with that being said, also Pierce Brosnan. I mean, is he even an actor? I don't know. He just kind of is Pierce Brosnan.
We know he's not going to be Cable in the new Deadpool movie.
That we know for sure. You know, Josh
Stay
Brolin
tuned for our
actually,
next episode of Rolling with Brolin.
Josh Brolin would have been a lot better in this role.
Yes, he would. It's a shame Hollywood didn't know what to do with him at this point in his career.
Yeah, it really is. But with that being said, I feel that Towering Inferno, had a lot of potential. Really long. Probably could have been a really good movie if it had been trimmed down quite a bit. Dante's Peak, great spectacle, lots of fun. Really bad writing. Twister, just a wonderful thrill ride all the way around. Just a great time. A disaster movie where the main characters are taking it to the disaster rather than the disaster, ruining their day.
This certainly sounds rational
freaking loved
and
it.
reasonable.
And I think we can all agree. I think we can all agree with my assessment of the movies that we just watched here.
You know what? One thing we completely missed at the very beginning of this podcast is what makes a good disaster movie a good disaster movie. Clearly, all three of us are at each other's throat, even though I'm more so on Caleb's side. More or less, me and Steven are at each other's throat. What makes a good disaster movie a good disaster movie?
I don't know.
I don't think, and you know what, Sam? Thank you for asking that, because that is the perfect segue to my final question of the evening. Because the disaster genre has pretty much been dormant since The Day After Tomorrow in 2012. I mean, there have been maybe one or two smaller films, but really we haven't seen a resurgence of the disaster film as a genre.
We got Independence Day resurgence or insurgence, or whatever it's called.
It's resurgence, so it pretty much is the perfect. It couldn't be better. Okay, thanks for tuning in to the Rule of Thirds podcast. We'll see you next month.
This is the final episode. We end there.
And we're done because our friendship is over.
Okay, but anyway, Steve.
No, but my question basically is, so to I'll use Sam's question as a base. What is it that makes a good disaster film? Is the disaster genre a genre that's worth rebooting? And if you personally had to reboot it, how would you choose to reboot the disaster genre?
I think it is a genre worth rebooting because I'm going to talk about. I know that you're iffy because you're going to classify things as sci-fi and disaster, even though one's an umbrella genre and the other's a subgenre. Transformers and Star Trek and these Jurassic Park, these newfangled modern disaster movies, to me, I don't like them because the way they treat human life. I know that we've pointed out some flaws in the ones that we watched in regards, but there are characters that you are genuinely attached to. It does treat human life like human life. Like when someone dies, it is a tragedy. I mean, you look at Star Trek is not really a disaster film, but I think in the second one where they crashed the spaceship into San Francisco, they crashed the ship. I don't know, they probably killed like 300,000 people in doing that.
They
and
kill
it's just
a lot of people.
Glossed over. And with Transformers, one of the most atrocious things I've ever watched when I was working at the theater, I walked in, I think, in the third one. And I think one of the characters crashes a ship into a group of people and gets out. And he's looking for his girlfriend. And they go on with their day. I think for me, a good disaster movie adds, even no matter how bad it is, like Dante's Peak, still has a bit of a human element. It does still appreciate human life. Because it kind of raises the stakes. Because you're like, oh no, I hated the grandma, but still her death was like, oh no, that was brutal. I didn't see that.
My question for the grandma was especially does she actually have mental problems? Is she just dementia or something?
Probably you could look into it. Yeah, she was best fucked up. But that's the things for me. I think it could be reinvigorated because I think people could maybe start going back to making disaster movies with more heart in it, I guess.
Well, and I'm glad that you said that, Sam, because that actually does bring up a good point about a point in Towering Inferno's favor, which is that it was long and there were a lot of subplots, but at the same time, those subplots served to create characters out of the people that you're going to see stuff happen to. Mm-hmm. So that is good. Like, I think that even though that movie could have been streamlined a lot, they really did focus on the character, aspects of what was happening there. You really had pretty much everybody had motivations and things that you understood, even the people who just die in like the most horrible, merciless ways possible. They treat them as human beings, whereas you're right, like a lot of modern movies, they're willing and ready and willing to kill like thousands, tens of thousands of people and just not even make a thing of it.
Whereas, as long as they're not your hero, it doesn't matter.
Right, exactly.
And which they dare really not kill off anyone.
Which is why the deaths in, say, the Towering Inferno have emotional resonance versus the ones in Dante's Peak really don't.
Yeah.
Because those characters aren't very well developed in Dante's Peak versus Towering Inferno.
Although I feel like the only character that actually has any kind of a potential emotional resonance in Dante's Peak is the leader, doctor dude. But then they Wilhelm scream him and it takes everything away. I can't believe that happened.
Their girlfriend in the beginning too.
I am amazed.
That's the thing is, no matter how bad the script was, there was still at least even like a half-ass emotional resonance with it. Because I mean, like I said,
ever half.
It was ham-fisted though. It was a script. Like they had ideas and they tried and they tried a lot harder than anybody tries today. But they didn't do a good job of creating emotional resonance. But they tried.
Yeah.
But they don't even try anymore.
No, you're right.
Like they'll just Superman kill literally million people. A million people will die. Like all of Metropolis will get destroyed, and a million or more people die, and it's not a big deal.
Exactly.
That just happens now. So
yes, I think it is a genre that needs reinvigorating because I think people have lost the sight of, and maybe it just reflects society. They were just becoming cold and heartless and just don't care about people, or maybe it's because special effects can allow us to destroy cities without anything. There's a military term about like the distance, like of emotional attachment to death from a distance. I don't know what the term is, but but it has to do with like snipers and modern drone flyers too. How the further they are, the less of an attachment they have to that. I think with computer effects, we can do so much damage. We have less of an attachment to it.
Think about this though. It's the global / 24 like the global news / 24-hour connectedness Facebook times we're living in, where you hear about literally everything that happens around the world. Mm-hmm. And so nothing that happens really has any relevance to you anymore. Like you like,
good point.
Like when these movies were coming out, like even in the 90s, the level of connectedness was so much lower than it is now that you didn't hear necessarily that today, several hundred people died in a terrorist attack in France. You might hear about that if you're watching CNN, because that's the only place that you're going to see that, CNN or one of the other, cable news networks. But otherwise, you're not going to hear about that stuff. You're going to hear about if, you live in freaking Anderson, Indiana, and something happens in Indianapolis. You'll hear about that. And that will have emotional resonance to you. But now we hear about literally everything that happens, and none of it has any resonance to us because we're hearing about everything that happens everywhere. So maybe that's kind of maybe Hollywood's perspective on tragedy and how much it has no human connection anymore is a reflection of where we are societally.
And maybe that needs to be the comment of the modern disaster film, is commenting on just that distance and that attitude. Honestly, I would pay to see that movie.
So you have to get an auteur filmmaker to make a disaster film. Which
absolutely, this is the time.
Yeah. Which has been done, but it's so rare.
If you could hire an auteur to direct a disaster film, who would you get? Caleb doesn't know directors. That's why he's laughing.
I would get Hideo Kojima to make his debut film.
I don't know. Oh, I know who I wouldn't get is Darren Aronofsky.
No.
I wouldn't get him to do a disaster film.
No.
Oh, that was kind of a disaster film, but no, I wouldn't get him to do anything because. But I don't know. I'm trying to think. I think
my pick would probably be like someone like a Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah.
Who can do kind of both elements.
He did a disaster film. Which one? Contagion.
Oh yeah.
I never
I haven't
saw it,
seen
but
that.
he did that. Yeah,
I haven't
but that
seen
is his
Maybe
movie
this
and
is
that
the
is his
film that
disaster
we're all
film.
talking about, and we just need to watch it.
Maybe no one liked it because it was too real. And
Caleb, get Contagion up on the Plex server so we can watch it, and then we'll do a special one-off review of Contagion sometime.
Okay, I hope it's good because otherwise it's going to be a waste of my time.
Steven Soderbergh's hit or miss.
The Ocean movies are pretty fun.
I'm looking
Some of
forward
the
to
best
it.
disaster films ever made. Because everything's a disaster film.
I'm going to educate you.
Oh, Sam.
I'm going to get you some
I need
literature.
to educate you on what words mean. All right, so
What are you talking about? No, we're going. This is going to be like our argument that will filter through all movies. Steven's inability to understand the definition of genres.
And Sam's
and
inability
how
to
they work,
understand
function.
science fiction.
It's a good thing that we're doing genre studies.
Right. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we close the book on our latest episode of Rule of Thirds. Disagree with our take? I know we do. Want to give us a piece of your mind?
I don't think Steven disagrees. I think me and Sam are on the same page here.
Shoot us an email at ruleofthirdspodcast@gmail.com to hear your remarks read on the air. You can also hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Thirds Rule. And don't forget to check out past episodes and reviews, as well as other original content on our website, thirdsrule.wordpress.com. And I am going to put that clip from Dante's Peak up there that we talked about on the episode. If you like what you hear, don't forget to tell your friends, as well as leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, which will go a long way to helping other people find us as well. This has been episode 108 of Rule of Thirds, entitled Disasters Caught on Film. Be sure to join us in August for another genre study filled with mystery, mayhem, and murder, probably of one of us. For Samuel Dumas and Caleb Dunkerson, I'm Stephen Foxworthy, reminding you that neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night can change the fact that Thirds rule.